Education to 7:02. All right, I always like to begin, actually let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and then we can read the mission statement. Everyone can stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you everyone for coming. I'd like to begin our meetings with the mission statement. Our mission is to inspire in each student a joy and passion for learning and a commitment to excellence, personal integrity, and social responsibility. I always love the nights that we have the internship presentations out in the gallery space. They're so really riveting. It's hard to kind of pull yourself away and come in, but I think that speaks to our mission statement so purely, and I love how it's always a segue into Avon Achievers. So I'd like for us to begin that piece of the meeting as well. So Noam, I would like to invite you on up. And Bogdan, if you want to join.
Joined by Larry Sparks, my assistant principal as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Deb. It's always an honor to kick off the meeting by talking about Avon Achievers and to be able to celebrate some really important people who are making huge differences at RBS and Avon Public Schools. And, I think about when I started these conversations, I think almost every single one I've started off by talking about how schools are complex systems and they have so many interrelated processes and procedures and a number of people. And I think that over the years in the schools that I've worked at, I've done a pretty good job recognizing staff for the hard work that goes on with them and who work hard to celebrate and recognize the students and the wonderful accomplishments that they have. But one of the things that I don't know if we have always recognized as well are our parents and families. And so I want to kick off our first Avon Achiever by recognizing Mrs. Erica Avon, who is one of my co-presidents of our PTO. And Erica has served in that role for probably many more years than she has thought that she would be serving in that role. But it's a tremendous credit to Erica that she's doing that. And that's exactly the kind of individual that she is. She's somebody that steps up and does whatever is needed and necessary to help us make the best kinds of decisions for our kids. And we're honored to honor her this evening. Mr. Sparks has a few words as well.
Yeah, thanks, Noam, for the privilege of joining in your tribute to Erica. I can look back at all the great milestones that have happened at our school, and they're all connected to like a plan or a person or both. And I can look back a long way and dot it all the way back to the horizon. Those milestones of the PTO have been many and very impactful. Just some, for examples, state-of-the-art playground designed around health and wellness, significant technology upgrades around the building, advocating for facility improvements, an after-school enrichment program that is really powerful and includes all students, a weekly newsletter that's highly informative and detailed. So yeah, looking back from 3 decades, you can see the continuous path of improvement, and you are that person behind those plans in your understated and so highly confident way. Noam and I are very gratified that you're in that spot, and we're hopeful for the future. So congratulations as an Avon Achiever. Erica Avon.
Well, hopefully I won't be here for 30 more years. But it's just a great school to be a part of, and the community is great, and I think that's why we love doing what we do. And I wish that my co-president for the last 2 years was still here. She sadly moved away, but I think she deserves a lot of the credit for what we have done the last couple of years, and we're just hoping to keep it going. So, thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Continuing along in the process of sharing, Noam and I have the distinct privilege of recognizing another person. This is an amazing, talented, and creative and hardworking individual who I've known for the past 12 years at Roaring Brook, and whose tenure there preceded me, so she's been doing this for some time. we go back to before email, if you could believe that. That's back at a time when some of the learning challenges that kids came to school with were maybe a little bit more predictable and reasonable, and we were well practiced for that. But this day and age, the challenges that come through the door are many and varied and highly complex, and really that makes them perfect for Sandy. My vision of her is she's sitting around with a grip on her guitar, or she's poised on the piano, and there's a group of kids, or even the faculty holiday singers are there, and she's got a rapport with everybody. And part of that rapport she uses to leverage great teaching opportunities. And she'll get to the point where she can do cartwheels on the playground, and the kids try to emulate it. So that's just the start, whatever it takes to get the learning to go. And how about that learning?
I have this very confident feeling in my heart that there's a belief that binds together the best educators. And that belief is that all kids want to thrive, and all kids want to succeed, and all kids want to be good and do good. And all kids have very different paths to help them get there. And it is our job, it's the job of every single person in this room, to help them find that path. And I feel tremendously honored to be able to work with Sandy on a daily basis. About a year and a half ago, she approached me and said, we can do better in one area to help create that path for our kids. And through her ideas, efforts, and tremendous hard work, she has been helping some students arrive at levels of success that I think are just astonishing, astounding, and beautiful. So, Sandy, thank you very, very much for doing this.
You're welcome.
So let me just take a brief moment on behalf of the Board of Ed to really thank Erica and Sandy for all of your passion and the vigor that you put into your work. The foundation that you're providing at Roaring Brook is really leading our students to success all the way up through Avon. So you hold a special place in my heart, and I know we're all grateful for what you do. So I just want to personally thank you and say we appreciate what you do and we notice. So I also know that many of you have come tonight to celebrate with them. And so if you would like to be excused at this time, you're more than welcome to do so without any prejudgment.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noam and Larry.
You're welcome.
All right. Now on to a little bit less exciting things. Could I have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes from last month, August 21st, 2018?
So moved.
All right, David moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Laura seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Now we're on to our part of the meeting where communication from the public is welcomed. So if anyone has something that they'd like to share with us, we ask you to just limit it to about 3 minutes. But we're very excited to hear from you. Is anybody here wanting to participate in that? All right. Well, thank you for coming. So now I'm excited. I see a new student rep sitting over there with Amir. So Addie Ganyetz, thank you for joining us as our junior rep. And Amir, thank you for coming back. We'll leave it to the two of you to kind of update us on what's going on in the school.
Thank you. I'm going to give her a chance to introduce herself. So,
Hi, my name is Addison Ganyetz. I'm not sure if any of you know me. I am a new junior at Avon High School. And I'm also the vice president of my class, and I'm in a couple of different clubs, including student government, Leo Club, and I've been in a couple of different ones throughout the years, such as Sierra Club and tutoring in the city my freshman year.
so we're excited to have her as our junior rep. So some of the things that have been going on at Avon High School, this week is Spirit Week, so we are dressing up according to what the theme of the day is. So today was Patriots Day, showing American pride. And as you've seen today, as you came in, they're having their internships, as usually they have. They show their presentations on a wide variety of things that they do, from it could be medicine to technology to politics to a lot of things. So one thing that I like to talk about, that recently I attended one of Dr. Carmenella's events that she has, which is at the Avon Public Library. And there we talked about, it was me, the doctor, and 3 or 4 other parents there. And we talked about a wide variety of issues ranging from school culture, security, homework, elementary issues, recess time and lunch, in like half day and full day. So those are some of the issues that we talked about there, and it was great to hear from the community about the things that they're looking forward to, and some of the things that they appreciate. They definitely talked about Doctor and the way that she does things. They think that she gets the job done. She's someone who is really personal, which is good that she has those things, even though a lot of people don't attend.
4 was a good showing.
Yes, 4 was a good show. So
5 with you.
Yes, sometimes it's 5 with me. So that was really great of her, and maybe people will start to attend more of those events that she has. Usually she does like a one-on-one session because there's not a lot of people that actually attend. So those were some of the issues that were brought up, and I thank you for allowing us to speak.
Through the chair, if I may. I just want, again, to welcome Addison, and so that everyone is on the same page, explain how Addison came to be here with us tonight, because I think that's important for us to know. As you know, we were looking for a junior this year. We had a year moving on from being a junior to a senior. Congratulations. And so what Addison had to accomplish to be able to sit here with us tonight was first to draw up a letter of intent stating the reason that she wanted to serve in this capacity, how communication to the board and to the students would be accomplished, because that's an important part of being a student representative on the board, and also to understand that it is a 2-year commitment. I did have to break it to Addison that she didn't get paid for the appointment, like after the fact. Just kidding. She also had to have 2 teacher signatures that would attest to her character. So Addison clearly was able to do all of that and wrote an excellent letter of intent that I'd just like to really one piece of. First of all, as Addison I think already mentioned, she's the vice president of her class, which of course comes with some responsibility and the ability to speak to people. But I think it's important that Addison talked about gathering information in a 2-way means of communication, not only from what happens in these meetings back to the high school and to the students, but also to bring information from the students to us. In other words, not only Addison's perspective, but that she clearly understood she was here to represent the student body, and as Amir does. And I appreciate that perspective, Addison, and I'm glad to welcome you here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to hearing from you. So, Addison, we will call on you from time to time and ask for your input. Amir's been very successful at that. We really appreciate it. So we're looking forward to hearing from you as well. So next, Heather Mashad, if you'd like to update us on the financial report, please.
Must be the one with the broken light, or broken in general. So I'm pleased to report that we had another, thank you so much. Another successful fiscal year as far as finances go. To joke a little bit, Houston's comments over the last several years when we will need to take out their checkbook, which is
Not a joke,
positive.
it's my checkbook, thank you.
I understand. We did close out the fiscal year with an unencumbered balance of $27,396.82, or just less than 0.05% of the budget, which is excellent. We would like it to be 0, but I'm sure everyone understands. That being said, I also wanted to bring attention to the opening encumbrance listing. We closed the year with 120 valid purchase orders.
a total of $996,769.18. So most of those, as we sit here, have been substantially closed down. It's just a matter of that we had to report them as of June 30th, following period 13. And then finally, I wanted to update you on the prior fiscal year escrow account. The board has been so kind to fund that over the last several years, and it's been hugely responsible for the position that we have been in financially, particularly as it concerns special education. We did close out the fiscal year having returned $59,100.12 to the town of Avon, and that was due to two separate movements of two separate students where the funds were held in that account. But still a very positive outcome given what it could have been if we didn't have that. So again, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them, but again, good year.
Thank you, Heather. Do any board members have questions for Heather?
What was it? Can you repeat what the final amount was that we returned?
It's on page 8.
It is on page 8, but if you wanted the escrow account amount, I can give that to you, which is separate.
I think she's looking for the 27,000.
Is it 27? Yeah, I just didn't hear what it was.
So it's $27,396.82.
Okay, thank you. Oh yeah, right here, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Heather. So now we'll move to the committee reports. Jackie, would you like to speak to the curriculum and professional practices?
Yeah, we had a great meeting this week after missing, we had skipped a month. We covered a lot of ground, and it didn't take too long. It was perfectly timed and well discussed and well attended. I thought we had a teacher and some administrators present. We discussed the capstone update, which everybody has a copy of. This is how they did the year in review. The administrators and the teachers kind of discussed the new direction that will be going in this year, and I thought there were some really great changes. They seemed to be really responsive to concerns last year, so things will be, kind of moving in a well-organized direction this year, and it sounded really exciting. Let's see. We discussed the 9 to 12 advisory with the built-in curriculum. We discussed the Pursue Your Passion Assembly, which was for juniors and seniors in early September. The capstone. We are changing some presentation dates. That's for the capstone also, to figure out where it fits best for kids when they're applying for colleges and taking tests and things like that. We talked about professional development, and we also discussed communication to families. I think we're going to be working on that upcoming, trying to get some essential numbers out from the district and from the town that parents in crisis might be able to find in a really speedy, handy way. And that was it. It was a really great meeting. We'll have another meeting in October, I believe the 29th, depending on if anything else changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Do board members have any questions? All right. Now moving on to the finance subcommittee. Jay?
I don't really have anything to add to what Heather presented. The only thing I would like to say is at our next meeting, we're going to be discussing the capital budget. So if anyone wants to attend, it is going to be held on Tuesday, October 9th at 6 p.m.
Any questions for Jay? Thank you. Negotiations, I don't know, Jason, do you want to,
I think we're going to have some more detailed discussions in executive session. Just really briefly, we completed a mediation with teachers, and we have a mediation with the custodians and maintainers scheduled for October 30th.
Excellent, thank you. And policy, Laura.
So there is quite a bit of material in the packet to take a look at from pages 58 to 106. Regarding the 3000 series, Heather had presented a very thorough, excellent review of all the proposed revisions to the 3000 series at several policy subcommittee meetings, as well as at a full board meeting, where we all had ample time to discuss the suggested changes as a first read. So please take a moment at some point, if you haven't already, to re-examine the suggested changes, and if there are no further edits, I'm hopeful, as is the committee, that the 3,000 series will be ready to be voted on tonight. Regarding the recruitment and selection policy 4111, you will note that the revised policy states the superintendent will make recommendations regarding the appointment of individuals who are non-affiliated to the board, and that their terms of employment will be subject to the approval of the board. This policy was drafted with assistance by Shipman and Goodwin, and is in accordance with Connecticut State Statute 10151. The superintendent and the committee are going to be asking the board tonight to vote on the revised policy unless anyone feels that there is a need for further review, in which case we would go ahead and pass this after our first read. Also addressed at the policy meeting were policies 1525, student records, confidentiality, and policy 5141, student health services, which will require further review, and we are getting some assistance from both Shipman and Goodwin and from the head of school nursing has been helpful on that as well. In addition, policy 5144.1, the use of physical force, was reviewed, and it is being considered tonight for approval by the board. Dr. Carnamola will be speaking further to that at some point. The reason for that is because we really need to be in compliance with state statutes that have changed over the summer. Then lastly, the subcommittee has spent a lot of time reviewing for a second read the homework policy, which the homework committee spent a lot of time working on and bringing their recommendations to the board as well as Mr. Giannini. So tonight, hopefully we'll have some good, robust discussion around that, and we're going to be presenting a few more bullet points, but we're going to be putting that forward as a committee for the board's consideration to act tonight.
Thank you, Laura.
And our next meeting, is October 2nd, Tuesday in October.
Excellent, thank you. So because we will be discussing these later, I'll just ask to hold off on questions until we get to the particular policies.
Perfect.
All right, thank you. So now liaison reports. So as far as board representative to Curriculum and Professional Development Council, again, that meeting doesn't happen until October, so there's nothing to report back on that at this time. The board rep to the Avon Board of Finance, David.
Okay. The major issues with the Board of Finance as we speak, they're currently undergoing the revaluation process, and the predictions are for little, if any, growth in the grand list to the town. It may actually go down a little bit. And that we don't have a lot of major construction projects that are ready to finish and therefore add to the grand list. There are a number of things planned for the next year or so, but it's not going to help us this year. So we were told not to expect any large increases in the grand list, which is going to ultimately make people somewhat sensitive to tax issues, referendums, and so forth. Speaking of referendums, we're on track for a referendum on the turf field. In case anyone hasn't heard the news, the budget for the turf field was increased approximately $300,000 to consider alternative forms of fill in case the building committee chooses something other than from rubber. And so the choice of the fill was actually left out because there are some major studies that are coming up, at least one of which should be in place in time for us to make a decision on what the fill is going to be. And then the other major capital item, which will also be a referendum, will be the public safety communication systems, which it looks like the police at first glance, but it actually impacts us because we have the SRO, and we need to make sure that everyone in the town, all the first responders, should be on a compatible radio system to expedite those responses should they ever be needed at a school for whatever reason. So that would benefit all of us also. So those are the two major bond issues that will come up for referendum, and that's everything I have.
Thank you, David. The date of the referendum is December 12th, just if anyone wants to mark their calendar. Does anybody have any questions of clarity for David? All right. So now...
I have one question.
Oh, okay.
Is the board of ed attending the information night, or is that a town?
That's a town, as a resident, you can certainly go and participate on that level, but it isn't a board representation kind of evening.
Thank you.
Board rep to Avon Town Council, I believe the date had been changed of the normal meeting night, and so Jason, you weren't able to attend, and I'm not sure we had anybody there from the
I
Board of
don't
Ed.
think so. There was the date change to the regular meeting, and there was another special meeting, I think. But long story short, I was otherwise engaged both nights. I did look at the agenda. The only things that I really saw on there that would have impacted us was the ongoing through-field discussion that, frankly, I don't think there's any new information really available. So that's the story there.
All right, thank you, Jason. All right, Board rep to Capital Region Education Council, Jackie.
Well, they held their meeting on a day that I was not available. So I'll be going in October, but every time I get information, I'm forwarding it to, I think both of you, I'm trying to. So I have nothing else to report. We can get those minutes at the next meeting. They'll be available for the public.
Okay.
And really, anybody who wants to be a sub should see me. We can always work on that so that we can get somebody to those meetings.
Yes,
They're
absolutely.
fun.
Anybody who would like to be a substitute for Jackie, speak up.
Yes.
Don't be shy.
Okay.
I'm working.
Okay. All right, thank you. So now the next part of our agenda is the board chair update. I really just wanted to take advantage to do a little pitch for some of the upcoming meetings that have already been discussed a bit. The first one actually is on Tuesday, October 2nd from 6 to 8 p.m. at Pine Grove School, the third annual resource fair for SEPTA, our Special Education Parent-Teacher Association, is happening, and that's always been very well received. They have over 20 different service providers on hand for parents to come in and ask questions of and really get to know options. So I just wanted to put that plug out there because it's definitely worth the time if you can make that. On Thursday, October 4th at 7 p.m. at the Fire Company No. 1 at 25 Dartland Drive is an information night that Jackie had mentioned before regarding the referendum items. So it's not only regarding the turf, but it's also with the police communication devices. So if you want to attend as a community member, you certainly can do that as well. It's meant for a question and answer, not to make a decision or be actionable. But I think it's important that everybody feel educated on these prior to the December 12th referendum. So that was all I had for my update, and I will turn it over to Dr. Carmola for the superintendent's report.
Thank you. Just revisit for a moment what Amir spoke about. I did hold the first community chat at the Avon Public Library, the first for this school year. I held one toward the end of last school year. I have them scheduled at present, I believe, every other month. The in-between months, we're just deciding what that ought to look like, but as you know, I'm often in other venues in town, including the senior center, for some of the events on those off months. And the purpose of the community chat is really for exactly what Amir described. It's not an appointment, it's not necessarily a presentation, it's I'm there and anyone who would like to stop in to see me without an appointment can come. And if, as you know, if they don't come, I tend to find folks to talk to in the library anyway and introduce myself to and have conversations since I'm there anyway, and I'm there at a good time of day, generally speaking. And we did this obviously to coincide with this because it's just as school is getting out, particularly the middle school and high school right after that, and we often have a number of students in the library that I can also interact with. This week, I was lucky enough that I had, as Amir pointed out, I believe 4 parents who came out specifically to see me, including Amir, who specifically came to see me, and I won't beat that horse. Amir already, thank you very much, explained very well what we talked about, a lot of questions and conversations about a number of items in the district. So I'd like to encourage folks, when you see that I'm doing that, and it is on the website, and I do send it out, to come out and see me if you're able to. And if not, as you know, I'm still having plenty of conversations in other venues out here in the schools at events like tonight and by telephone. That said, I just want to again thank Ms. Briscoe, Mr. Rankowitz, and all of the faculty and staff at high school for working with young people like the ones here tonight. Once again, I thought this was a fabulous display of what we do in Avon with our students and our ability to compete globally by engaging in these sorts of internships is amazing to me, and I know all of you every time I see it. So thank you again. Very much appreciative. I learned a lot out there, and I sometimes wonder what life would be like if I had the opportunity to do one of these sorts of internships. That's not saying I wouldn't still be sitting here. I'm just saying it's very, very exciting what these students get involved in. As you know, also I've been out in schools quite a bit. We've had during the days, trying to, as I say, memorize habitats, teachers, students, locations, grades, names, and have a lot of conversations with faculty and staff about where we are and where we're headed, but that's a conversation again for later this evening, a few minutes, I suppose. And we've also had a number of open houses already. I think we have the middle schools tomorrow night for 7th grade. We've had great turnouts at the open houses, all of them, including the high school, which is, again, a testament to the teachers and the administrators and the parents for coming out, because especially, I'm sure you know, as a board, the further along in the grades that we go, the less parent engagement we often have, but that is not the case as we've seen in our open houses. We had a packed house here at Avon High. I was glad to see that. So moving on to the hiring report. This is page 16. As you know, this is the report we put out every month. This is September's. We have some new hires. They're all non-certified staff, some resignations due to moves, and I believe a retirement. And then on the bottom, you see that have a new category that you would only expect to see sometime around this time of year, or whenever we hire a new person who is a non-affiliated person. These are reappointments, you notice. In other words, none of these are new hires. These are all individuals who already work in district, but non-affiliated, as we know, is non-union, so they have individual contracts that range from 1 to 3 years, and these are all typically end on June 30th, and then there is a reappointment based on salary and benefits for a year moving forward. This is also relates back to the policy that Ms. Young mentioned regarding recruitment selection and the appointment of non-affiliated individuals. So for sake of the board and the public being able to see who our employees are that have been reappointed, from our director of operations to our courier and bus driver, you see if there's any questions about that I might be able to answer. I will, but expect it to be a point of information, generally speaking, because as you know, we have conversations about the strategies for negotiating these contracts. And they are subject to board approval. Enrollment reports, moving on to page 17, you see that from August to September, we are down 10 students, but if you look closely, the majority of that is actually from Pine Grove. We are 9 students less at Pine Grove. We had 9 students move out of town between August and September from Pine Grove. But then if you look down, we're up in other schools. So Roaring Brook, we're up 4, as the time this report was run, 1 at Thompson Brook, down, and one at Thompson Brook, down 1 at the middle school, and down 4 at the high school. So we're balancing each other out for a net loss of 10 at this point. But as you know, that enrollment can fluctuate quite a bit. And you see that we're down 72 from exactly the same time last year, and I'm sure we all remember that the senior class is a big piece of that. The last senior class was one of the largest we had seen in quite a while. So still, we are balanced out between K to 12. Just quickly go through, if it is okay with the board, I don't think I necessarily have to do these in exactly the same order as the letters. If it's possible, I'll do the security update before the strategic plan update, just because I have to get up for that, if that's all right with you.
I just have a question back on the
sure,
enrollment.
Stop, yes.
So on the enrollment, seeing that there's 60 less students at Avon High School than there were last year, if you could please at some future meeting update the board on the class sizes that we're having at each of the courses at the high school, just to see how that's been impacted.
Yes, thank you. We've already begun work on that. I think that would be a question, so thank you for bringing it out.
Could I sort of backstrike a little bit?
Yes.
Your enrollment report, the hiring report.
Yes, sir.
Under the new policy, that would require approval for the people listed on the bottom half of page 16. Are you requesting us to approve that, or are you merely notifying us, as Dean Atchison said to Charles de Gaulle, because the policy is not yet effective?
The policy is not yet effective, although I would actually contend that this still would be in line with policy, only in that new hires require approval. The terms of the contracts for the reappointments, I believe, require approval by the board, and so...
Correct. So are you asking for a vote on that, or you're
No,
not asking for a vote?
I'm not asking for a
So
vote.
you're informing us, you're not asking for our approval in accordance with the new policy that hasn't been approved yet?
Yes, and yes, but I think that still leaves a little bit, I guess, back to the same point of interpretation, because the terms of the contracts were discussed. I was given parameters for the contracts by the board.
I understand, but I'm trying to, the presentation that you've made tonight would not be in accordance with the new policy, assume it's approved. So therefore, that's fine. I don't have a problem
No, I
with
understand.
any of these hirings or what I anticipate the details of any of the contracts would be. However, if you are trying to say that you would like all of these people to be handled as if the new policy was in force, then you need a vote. And since you're not asking for a vote, that's fine. I'm just saying because that policy isn't in force yet. It may be enforced in 15 minutes.
Correct.
And we
So no, I'm not asking for a vote.
went from, previously, we were approving this, and we decided we didn't need to approve it. But I'm just trying to make sure I understand what your intention is. And you said that you are informing us, you are not, in fact, insulting us or seeking our approval, which is fine, because it's not required as of yet.
So,
It's one of the few times where the order and the agenda matters.
but let's leave it as is, because I think there has to be a little bit more discussion around the policy then, I guess is what I would say. So no, I'm not asking for a vote, but I think we have to have a discussion about what the approval of the terms of the contracts look like. Does that look like a vote to the board, or does that look like the process we've already gone through?
Oh, we can certainly have that discussion.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I do it right in the future, given that this is new. Okay. Any other questions about the hiring report or the enrollment? Okay. So, as I mentioned, if it's okay, I just want to run through quickly the security projects, the updates. I think much of this we know already, but you know, until it's complete, we've been updating along the way here, and when we are more complete, and when I say more complete, I mean in regards to the last batch of projects that are mostly capital that we had requested the appropriation from the Board of Finance for, in other words, the cameras and so on. We're not complete, as you know, because how long this work has taken, but I think along the way we should know where we are. The visitor entrances, as you know, have had quite a bit of work over the summer, and even as the school year has started. The Thompson Brook, the new window area is complete. The visitor door to the office, if you've been to the middle school, you know is complete, and you are now rerouted. Pine Grove, as you know, there is a different setup in the front which does not allow for easy change to the entranceway, so instead we have assigned one of the safety and security specialists to the front, so that even though you are not coming in a different way, you are now coming into a security desk. At the high school, we have a window on order so that we can finish the change here, and of course, as you know, we do have the double doors already installed here, so the changes are different. All of the exterior door locks, the new locking mechanisms have been installed, and they have all been wired. The business office is now in the process of working on the database for those key cards, because now it's a punch list of giving people access at certain times of the day and setting people up in groups to be able to use the key cards. So they are installed, they are wired, they are not live yet. We're all still using our keys until that database work is complete. The surveillance cameras, all the wiring is complete. The exterior cameras are complete. The high school, the installation has begun, and there is some fiber optics that should, last I knew, be completed today, but as I sit here tonight, I can't tell you whether or not they got completed. I didn't circle back there. I knew they were working on it today. It should be completed to go along with the networking of the wiring. The traffic bollards have been installed permanently in all of the schools, and the removable bollards that are being installed, again, they were working on today. How far they got with that in the rain, I'm going to guess wasn't too far. And they are.
There is a question
Yes.
about the bollards, just
Yes,
looking
sir.
at the distance between them at the
Middle school.
southeastern high school
Okay.
entrance. They're not effective. You're missing at least one.
I know they came back out, I said the middle school because I thought you were going to say there. They are installing 2 additional bollards at the middle school for the same reason. When they put them in, the distance wasn't appropriate. So here at the high school,
It's
they
like
are.
12 feet. I mean, I can drive a tractor
Yeah.
trailer through 12 feet.
Honestly, we had the same issue at the middle school, so they're putting 2 more in, and they're coming back out here to look at this one.
So they're doing the same thing in high school.
I'm going to, right now, make an
Raise the
assumption that is about what's
except
about to happen.
If no one has noticed, I'm not sure that.
No, they've noticed.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why they've come back out for the middle school, and they're coming back out here.
Okay. Any other schools where?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. What's the distance you expect between the bollards? So I'll run around with the tape measure.
Good. Good question. You would ask me that. Do you know the distance? I didn't have Miles give me that number.
Okay.
I will look. But it was developed by the physical threat assessment team from the police department. So they were supposed to put them in line with that, and as you can see, 2 places that didn't happen.
Okay. It would be nice to know the number, so since
Got it.
they couldn't measure, that if we feel like measuring, we can make sure it's done right.
Thank you. The window film is complete at all of the schools except Roaring Brook, and that is scheduled. And the change to the pickup doors at Pine Grove has been completed. Those were all parts of this ongoing project. Aside from that piece of the capital pieces of the project, the other interior and planning versions of security, I guess that we refer to them, we have finished our district all-hazard plan once again and submitted it to the state after going over it in district and with local police and fire, emergency management, town manager, and so on. We've all reviewed that plan as required by state law. We have also updated all
Let me
individual.
just raise a
Yes, sir.
question. Has the chief signed off on it again?
Yes.
Okay, and we've delivered it to the new plan, and we delivered it to the state of Connecticut.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. As you know, that they had been, I'm sure you're asking because it had been a continual
Delayed.
news story about who had been delayed and so on. Ours had been turned in, and it is turned in again. We are ahead of schedule. It's due November 1st to the state, but I had asked, and Jim Connolly and the our security director and the building administrators and the police department agreed that it be done sooner because it's better to start a school year with a plan in place than wait until November to be rehashing it. So I'm thankful that a lot of work was done there. Likewise, we have taken into consideration more related to the central office version of this plan, which had not been looked at very much until now. Matter of fact, in the next week, we're having more meetings around there what the protocols are for us at central office when there is an issue of a safety concern at central office, not so much in one of the schools. That's the piece we've talked about. It's what to do when, for example, if central office had to go into lockdown or to evacuate. Every room in the school district, and I've been checking for these while I'm out there, and I know the administrators have been too, thank you, has been given an updated emergency procedures folder. They look the same, they have all the same things in them, but for what they need related to the school, the specific maps for the school and the specific procedures related to any given emergency in the school. Those all match up to the district, the school plan, and then the district plans. So they've all been revised to make sure that every classroom has one there, usable and visible to both the people working in the classroom on a day-to-day basis, or if there are substitutes that might be in that classroom, that they can easily follow the plan in whatever the situation is. Any questions about any of that?
The security package that was purchased to scan visitor IDs, what's the status of it?
That is installed. However, the chief of police, the security director, the SRO, and I are scheduled to meet to discuss the protocols for what happens when a person is, they call it flagged, in the system as a sex offender, just to make sure that, we had this conversation before about the database, to make sure that we follow legally the proper channels. And in the meantime, our security director has gone out, as I mentioned, he would, to some other districts that had one implemented to have some conversations about how it was working there and what their internal procedures looked like so that we could be certain we got a well-rounded view. And as I mentioned also, I was in touch with board counsel to go through for the same reason. So they are installed, but for the time being, we are still vetting visitors through our normal system, I would say, with their IDs and signing in and out and so on, because we'd rather implement that properly from the get-go than have any issues related to someone's sex offender history that might come up and have an office person not know what to do with it. We want to make sure they're properly trained. So I expect that we will have that, and we have the documents ready for it in draft form to go out as notifications and so on to the parents, as we already discussed at our last board meeting. But I would expect that to be ready to go by November.
Is that going to be a policy, a reg, or some other animal that is not subject to review by the policy committee?
That would be procedures, some of which I think will be a part of the confidential school security plan in conjunction with the police, but the procedures that they will follow in the buildings will be the equivalent of regulations that I would put together alongside of them.
The board's not going to review that?
Not at this time. If it comes,
In fact,
if we need to.
developed the policy?
No, that's what we are doing alongside of the police department.
Okay.
We have some ideas about how to do it, but we haven't put it pen to paper until we get some feedback. Because this is new for the police department also.
Jeff has a question.
Jeff?
Thank you for the updates on the various schools. Were there any updates to our central office building?
From a security standpoint?
Yes.
Yes, the door locks were changed at central office also.
That was it. The film wasn't added, additional cameras weren't added. It's just the door locks.
Just the door locks.
Okay.
There are additional cameras that will be at central office,
Coming.
correct? Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And the film is not a part of our project.
Okay.
Okay? Okay. So let me back up, Shirley. Let me hand this out just so you have it in front of you. I didn't want to waste the resources of printing it out in the blue, but we had it at least, so if you wanted to make notes or what have you, there should be enough copies, but I may have handed the wrong number both directions. Let's see what we have. Is that mic on in the middle if I stand up? Because it'll be easier for me to hit. Thank you.
We're short of you. I don't know if you're in the...
I think there's extra that went that way.
That's my guy.
The one advantage of sitting in the seat, I can see. Excellent. But if you really small ties, then I'm in trouble. Thank you.
Try not to use small type, whatever.
Yeah, sure, I'll take one.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, you can hear me if I'm here? You want me to turn it up? Okay. Just for your sake, I know they can hear me. Thank you. So, this is not meant to be the entirety of our strategic planning or the conversation that we will have again about it, but I wanted to put something concrete together so that you knew where we were in the process since we had our last conversation at the board retreat back in, it seems like forever ago now, I think it was May or June. So we have had a number of meetings in district to begin with. Shirley, can you hit the next slide for me, please? Thank you. Addison, this might be the first thing I ask you to do as a board rep. Do you know how to move the slides forward? Thank you. Awesome, because I know you can reach it. So I just wanted to give an overview of the process thus far so that you knew where we were. Obviously, for strategic planning, we start with gathering information, and I've been doing that since before I even started really in Avon as a piece of even making a decision to come and work in Avon and to learn more about the district. But since we've started this process, I and the team as a whole have been doing this together. And of course, we're looking at answering questions, what are we doing well, what can we do better? And I outlined just a few of the ways that we have been doing that. Obviously, observations, just being out there, being present myself, listening to folks that are out in the schools, talking with board members, talking with students, meetings with administrator, faculty, staff, many meetings I've had with parents and community members, some community groups that have come to meet with me, as you know also. These community chats I've had at the library, whether people have come specifically to see me or not, once they realize that it's me that's there, they inevitably have something they want to talk to me about in relation to the schools. Many meetings, as you know, also with town officials, including from the fire department, from the police department, between the chiefs and I, Brandon Robertson, people, you name it, people, Public Works, this senior center. I've been out there quite a bit, kind of hitting the pavement, so to speak, to have a lot of these conversations about what people love about what we do and what people are hoping that we do better. And of course, the less glamorous part of gathering that data, right? The assessment data, the surveys that we have access to that we've been doing for years related to school climate, related to hiring staff. We have a number of data points there that we've been able to look at. And our State of Connecticut reports are a wealth of information because, one, they're required, the data has to be clean, data like attendance, discipline, data, test scores, and so on. Anything that you could think of that you might want to look at, we submit in a report in one way or another to the State of Connecticut. And as the superintendent, I am the certifier of all of that data. So I'm usually the first to see it, and then once it's certified, to be able to share with the rest of the staff. Likewise, as you know, there's a tremendous amount of data collected out in our schools about student performance, about staff, don't walk at home if they're watching this, the SLOs that they complete, which are the learning objectives that go along with teacher evaluation and so on. So this is all of what we've been looking at for months to try to get a sense of where are we and where are we headed. This is the bulk of the work. This is what I would say is the harder part and the meatier part. And I think what I have to pause for a moment and say here is that, and am I still okay if I'm back here? I just don't want to. If you were thinking in my head about the way that this works, or I put a graphic up, it would be a giant circle, really, from the time I started talking tonight about this, but particularly in the meat of it, because this is a cyclical process of gathering the information, of analyzing it, of making the decisions, continually gathering feedback and circling back in that loop to determine how we're making progress and how we move forward. A lot of times, another way people refer to this is continuous improvement. I like to just think of it as this cyclical way that we continue to do better. So what we started doing in compiling and analyzing and synthesizing all of that information was to take what had been the current strategic plan and our mission statement that we went back to, the full mission statement with the beliefs and so on, not the abbreviated one that we read at the board meetings. And after having done that as an administrative team at central office, one of the things that became apparent through our meetings and being out in schools and having conversations with teachers and administrators was that we needed more time and development together as an entire administrative team, meaning every administrator from central office and every administrator from the buildings, the principals, the assistant principals, not the smaller team per se, but to be able to run a course together so that we could have broad conversations and talk coherently about our plans. And so when I say discussions with the entire administrative team, that's what I mean. And while that may not sound that novel, it has been novel for us, in part because we have new people on the team, but also because we made a decision, and you know this already as a board, but it's relevant to tonight, to have an administrative retreat where we took everyone from the district, from me to the security director. And for 2 full days, we talked about where we are and where we need to be, and had really deep conversations about the work together. And so again, if you go down to the next bullet, the discussions with the faculty and the staff team, they were all part of the same team. That's how they started. They started with us as the leaders of the district. And then again, in this version in my mind of this cyclical path, every time we have these kind of conversations where we're discussing any piece of improvement for ourselves, and we're going through an exercise together, and I'll explain that a little bit more when I show you the next piece. I'm always saying to the building administrators, kind of driving them crazy, I think, with this statement, we're doing this here with you. We're doing this here together. Think about how you do this with your faculty and staff when you go back to your buildings. Because if we're to have this blueprint for excellence, this plan that we're really all rallying around and following, I'll use Donna's expression, everyone's fingerprints have to be on it for us all to roll in the same proverbial direction, right? So it has to be about what we discuss, and then it has to be that we get the rest of the district to comment on that, give us feedback, and to make sure that we're headed in the right direction. So we've done that together. We've done that together more than once as an administrative team, and also as an administrative team going back to the faculty and staff in one way or another. And this is how we started to identify our strengths and our potential areas for growth. And we started seeing some focus areas that came out of that. We started narrowing down what you can imagine those conversations might look like. I started by saying to administrators, if you had 3 things you could accomplish, if it was only 3 things you could accomplish this year, what would they be? And that was the question I asked them to start their mind thinking in that bigger picture way. Not necessarily that you're going to get the lines painted out in the parking lot, right? That's the stuff that we have to get done. But if you were going to have a great year and we were going to do great work together, what would the 3 things be that you got done? And that's what jump-started this conversation. And started when we started filling all of this chart paper with all of these things that we thought we wanted to do, obviously. In some ways, it was a 25-year plan, not a 1-year plan or a 3 or 5-year plan. And that's normal in education, right? Because we just want to do as much as we possibly can to get better and to do what our students need us to do. But we started coalescing those ideas into focus areas. And then I like Donna's language around this, and I'll credit her with this, the list of dreams and aspirations for our students. What is our vision of the graduate, right? What is a person who's gone through Avon Public Schools know, and what are they able to do? And how are they connected to us as an entire school district, not just as a high school? What's our vision for them, the dreams and the aspirations for our students? And so we started to now be able to go down the path of what the goals, the actions might look like. And the timelines very loosely at this point still, because we're still talking very broadly. And then we started talking about this theory of action as cementing the work. So this is a different way for us to approach the work as a district than we had in the past. And when we all got together and started having these kind of conversations, I think one of the things that came out most loudly for all of us was that we're doing a lot of great work as a whole, across the whole system. But some of what we're doing doesn't necessarily look the same from place to place. We may not use the same language to describe it from school to school. And some of what is happening, you might say, is happening in pockets or silos. And that's when we talk about coherence, right? there's a piece of what we're doing very well. There are many pieces of what we're doing very well that are fragmented to one degree or another. Which brings us back to, if we're thinking about things like, what is our vision of a graduate when they leave us? How do we promote that from the minute they come in the door in pre-K or kindergarten until they leave us in 12th grade? That's a system that has to be in place. It's not a school, it's not a series of schools, it's not a series of grades. It's an entire coherent system. And when we started to realize that this might be where we needed the most work and pulling all of that together, that's when we started going down this path of our theory of action, if you will, to guide along the work. Because by using this kind of a framework, we can start to have those kinds of conversations that bring out people's beliefs, that bring out their assumptions about what works and what doesn't work. And they help us to really clarify our intentions. A theory of action statement is an if-then statement. We call it like a hypothesis. If we do this, then this will happen. And so you see, your mind can start going around the kind of things you can put into a sentence like that, and you can see what I mean about surfacing assumptions and generating beliefs, right? Because to be able to complete that sentence, you have to do both of those things, right? And you have to start to think about a lot of other variables and about whether or not the action you take is really going to then result in the desired outcome. And so we had quite a bit of conversation around that and decided that that needed to be the starting place for us as an administrative team across the district as the foundation for this work, because it would help us to connect those beliefs and that vision to the actual strategies we employ, right, to get the outcomes that we want. So when we have a statement like that, it's easier for us to provide a basis for understanding, for everybody to understand what do we need to do, why do we need to do it, which is sometimes the most important one, right? It's not let me ship out this initiative, everybody, this is the goal, this is what we expect, this is what we're going to do, and a lot of times what you're left with is, well, why is that what they chose to work on, right? Why is that what they think is important? By developing this idea of this belief system, this theory of action that we build the goals on, our intent is that everybody will understand from the same space where we're headed.
Let me interrupt you here.
Sure.
One of the things that concerns me is you've got everybody collaborating except the board. And I have a problem with that. Okay. Because at that point, you're presenting us with a final thing saying, oh, this is what we would like to do. Everybody got together, we're in agreement. And we say, nice, but we have some input that we'd like to give. And you haven't, in fact, put in that. You're saying, you know, transitioning to our framework. And in fact, the board is, you know, we haven't met with the board. And I can tell you that I was going to raise it as something further on. I particularly have an interest in making sure we do something with gifted students. So I would say, I don't need one thing, but I think it would be fair to say, give a presentation of 3 things that we could pick from that you think are reasonable. I mean, I'd be happy to do 3, but I think that's too much. So you're well on your way. I appreciate that, but the board has not been involved. And in order to bring us along to match some of our vision with administration's vision, we need to start getting involved. And that's not happening yet, and I wanted to say I'm concerned.
I feel like this is kind of what grew out of our retreat. That's where you started.
I understand, but I think that we're not getting feedback at this point.
Well, I think this is our first presentation since the retreat. We probably will have an opportunity to speak tonight, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to your point, Houston, and I didn't point it out publicly on the screen because I knew you were all there, but one of the ways of collecting the data and having these kind of conversations, I actually started with the board. So I started within the first 2 or 3 weeks that I was here, and I met with every individual board member here to go through your perspective and where you were coming from, and I believe I asked the same question of all of you. If we were going to be successful together, what might we work on? And so that actually started this process for me. And then I left those meetings and started just finding my way around, sometimes literally, in the district, and managing the dead day from then until the end of the year and getting to know better what was going on and so forth. And the next thing we knew, it was graduation. So we were putting together some of this. But what I'm talking about us having done has only happened, all of this has only happened in the last, the nitty-gritty of this work has only happened in the last month. So this administrative retreat that we had was the 2 days before staff came back, because we had to manage getting, I think there were 19 of us together with summer schedules and so on. And we did manage to do it. We got 19 of us together for 2 full days just before we opened school. That was when we were able to do it. And so back to this being a cyclical process. So I started with the board members individually. I went through starting to have bits and pieces of conversation and figuring out what data to collect here in the district and talking after you to the central office people. Then I started going out in schools. Now we've had the retreat as all of us as administrators. And I've asked them to take this back to their buildings while I take this back to you. So tonight was just to update you on the progress of doing this, because as I mentioned at the retreat that we had, I didn't expect to have something that we could truly hang our hats on, so to speak, until November. And I'm still on target to do that. I just wanted you to know where we were and what we had done as a team inside to be able to bring back to you as a board. Go ahead. Someone else have a question for
Yeah, just a comment. So I think the value of these updates, I think why they're important is as a way for us as representatives of the people to check in and see that the progress that you're making, the administration's making, the faculty's making is still focused on those goals, that vision that we set together. So I think the importance of having this be a standing part of our board meetings is key to that, right? So we can, kind of that feedback loop we talked about, that's what we're doing here. We're saying, yes, that supports the vision we had, or actually I think point number 2 doesn't align with what we actually meant. So that's kind of my perspective on the importance of this part of it.
And also to be clear, I brought back what we spoke about. So our administrators and us as an entire team have seen the bullets that we talked about as what was important to the board and the vision going forward, the goals that we were hoping to start discussing. So I would say that they've really been interwoven in the conversations that we've had. And a lot of them are honestly directly related back to the previous strategic plan. This is not a complete reinvention of the wheel, because that plan was done well in many ways. So anyway, back to, so we're talking about this transition just in our way in-house of thinking about the work and the process. And that's really what I want to talk to you about tonight, is the process. I'm not here tonight to bring you the goals. I can talk to you about the focus areas, and I have an example of something in one of those focus areas for you tonight, because the administrative team as a whole has been hard at work at this, including, I think it was Thursday. Last Thursday, we were together in this room for 2 hours. And again, as an entire team, circling through, still trying to whittle back some of these bigger goal areas and belief statements to be able to bring back to you. And I want to honor that work and make sure that we are progressing in a way forward that's not me shoving it downward, but that it's this cyclical process between you and I and everyone that works in the school district. Down to the, we were talking, Maggie Dreyer has been a part of those conversations here, for example, because it doesn't matter if you're one of us or one of our food service workers or our secretaries or nurses or custodians. We want to make sure that people understand the conversations that we're having to be able to move forward. So this way of thinking about improvement, this theory of action that we are talking about, to be able to finalize that we broke down everything that the board and I talked about, everything I've heard from parents, everything I've heard from students, everything they've heard from parents and students, and they've given to me as administrators, teacher feedback and so on, to this point. It's not completely finished, particularly within the school, and trying to gather some more feedback from our certified and non-certified staff. Basically, no matter what has been said, we determined it falls into one of these focus areas. And the first three are the same that match up to the previous plan that we had as a school district. Culture, achievement, communications. We said bolded systems because a lot of what we found ourselves talking about and people were talking to me about were related to the systems. Whether it's a hiring process or it's attendance or it's some other functional system and structure that has to be in place in a way that makes the rest of the world turn, so to speak. There were a lot of conversations about that. And so we added that one on for the time being as its own category, because so many of the things we talked about fit into it. And so because that was the new focus area, so to speak, I took that one and brought you one of these if-then statements as an example. And this is the draft, but they've worked on this quite a bit with us as administrators. So I think you can probably see it, but I know this is a smaller one. If we create or refine, as in some places they already exist, and strengthen our district-wide systems, then we can fully optimize our human capital in pursuit of our district goals. So you see what I'm saying now? This is a broad brush. This isn't a goal. This isn't a SMART goal. This is what are we basing what we're doing on? What's the belief inherent in what we're moving forward? So an example of something that might fall under this kind of a system focus area, again, we go back to attendance. So you could talk about student attendance, and it would fit here, and have a goal related to student attendance. You could talk about staff attendance, because either way, you have to be here for us to fully optimize our human capital, right? That's one small piece of that. But just to put it in perspective for you, so you know the brush that we're speaking with at present. And so from these, we are looking to have at least one of these sort of guiding theory action statements, and then put the goals, focus areas underneath, and the strategic actions that go with them. So we have a document. This is in draft form. This is not to be put out, but I think that just showing you something. So when I loaded this up tonight, gives you a good example of where we are. Just to show you the overview. So you see this document is divided into those 4 categories. I'm not expecting you to read that. I just want to get you to get a sense. This is the current draft that we are working from as an administrative team. And so we have it accessible to us in that Google Doc. We're working from it when we're together. We're working from it separately when we can't make the meeting time to be together. And what you saw in there are pieces of what we discussed as strategic actions as a board. There are things that have been discussed out here, and we're deciding where they get categorized so that we can write relevant goals. So you can see it's a big work in process, and it looks a little bit messy right now, which is why it's still in draft form. But it's come a long way because the document didn't exist until there were basically 4 sentences on that piece of paper about a month ago after we had that retreat together. Because some of that, it wasn't only about putting this together. A lot of it was also professional learning for us as administrators to all get on the same page, use the same language, make some decisions about how we were going to work together as a team and engage in that kind of teamwork. Because it was really the first opportunity that we have had to do that since I've been here and our new hires have been here. And we've moved Ms. Orangowitz to high school, for example. So, unfortunately, we have one more principal to bring into this fray, and potentially a human resources director, but we weren't going to stop the work and wait for that. So I'll take all the questions, just sum this up by saying, I just wanted you to bring you into my mind and our minds about how this is working behind the scenes, so that when I come back and we have a conversation again, you understand what this process has looked like and how we're building it forward, so that when I do bring you what we are thinking about based on the feedback you've already given and now the feedback we're giving, and we hash it around again, you know how we got here. Jack, you want to ask me something?
Thank you. I think it sounds really exciting that you've been kind of making sure that everybody's fingerprint is on this document. I have a couple of questions. The other comment I wanted to make was I'm thrilled to see systems on there. I think it's definitely something that needs to be kind of cultivated and figured out, and I think it's really going to be helpful to all of us. Tell me about the timing. What does this mean to me now?
What this means to you now is that, so next Thursday, we are meeting as a smaller administrative team, because time is of the essence at this point. So what that means is all the district administrators and just the principals. And we are going to go through narrowing down what you saw on that, what I'm calling kind of very messy but thoughtful document at this point. At the same time, clearly we're juggling some other plates, one of which is the budget. So we have set up this course of meetings. Basically, we are all together every third Thursday now. And that is a new way of us meeting. We used to just be the principals. The third Thursday of the month, we get together for a couple of hours as an entire team, and this is the bulk of our work. What are we doing? How are we getting there? Discuss our progress, blah, blah. And on October 4th, we'll work on this again. We'll take off the real meeting in October, because we need to get our budget pieces ready. But we're approaching the budget process in the same way from a district standpoint. That's why we're doing it all together. This is another topic for another time. But we will then have a draft that I feel captures the beginnings of what we talked about, and now what we've talked about to bring back to you.
So we have to vote on this, to adopt this, or what is our final role to be in this as a board?
So moving forward, so that's October. So by November, ideally, the district plan is the district and the board plan. It's our plan, right? So there are pieces that we have to look at it from our perspective as a board, and there are pieces that belong to the school, that live in the schools, and that live just in the work that we do. So we would be looking to look back at our mission statement and bring that tonight. I will say up front right now that we've been utilizing that quite a bit and breathing life into it, I would say, not necessarily revising it that much. It's very well done. And we have to have a conversation about it again, and we're still toying with it too, but bring you back the mission statement, bring you back the district pieces of this plan, have a conversation about it, make sure that our goals are aligned as a board and the district together. And yes, ultimately, we would want to vote on to endorse the plan moving forward. And then what does it look like?
Around December timeframe.
Yeah, updates from me on the progress and so on. And how do we combine some of the steps and the goals with my evaluation? Those are conversations that I think we have to still have. Thank you when we get this together.
Couple of comments. Having done this before, I'm feeling rather isolated. Before, if I wanted to go to a meeting, I would go to a meeting. So I would appreciate the opportunity to be able to attend but not speak at an administrative meeting just to see how things are going, because there's lots of stuff that's going on that I'm concerned is going on and I don't know about. I'm sure that I remember all the focus groups, and did I attend all of them? No. But I certainly attended a fair number and occasionally butted heads with people when they said, oh, we should do this, and I can say things that you can't.
Can I just clarify?
Sure.
Do you mean, because you mentioned the administrative meetings, and then you said focus groups.
Right.
Do you mean both focus groups that are out in the community and the administrative meetings for feedback from
It would probably be a good idea to have both, but I was specifically mentioned the administrative team. I don't care. You could do one or the other and not do both if you think it's preferable.
Well, I think we need to do both, but I just want to clarify because my thought process was that as we're further along and back to this cyclical piece of feedback, that we would be having conversations together, and then once I knew we were working from the same place, I and/or we, whoever could be there, would be out at some of these strategic meetings in the community. I'll do it at the community chat, I'll do it at the senior center, I'll have sessions here, and we can answer questions and be a part of that process. So that, I thought, was fairly solidified and happened in the past.
Right, it has happened in the past, so that when we had focus groups where relatively few members of the board were present, but we'd have 30 or 40 parents and students, and we'd be hashing out all sorts of things with a fair bit of detail. I just feel that that's missing.
That putting the plan together from the get-go with that many people in the room is missing?
Right. And, I don't have a problem with it being primarily something that's engineered by the administration. I have a problem with that. But I want to be able to be involved in the process, to at least watch it. I have some concerns, and if your plan comes all the way up and you're talking about implementation of the plan, and there's nothing special about gifts to children, in light of my previous comments, I would say I'm concerned because it doesn't meet our mission statement. Because fill in the blank. And consulting us quarterly makes our input more difficult to implement.
Did I infer that I was consulting you quarterly?
No. I'm just taking, because at this point, this is a presentation, you're not consulting us. And I'm telling you, well, it's not, because you're not asking us for a vote here, but I'm...
No, but we're having a discussion.
We're having a discussion, I understand. You didn't ask for a discussion, you're getting it.
Okay, Houston, let me put my take on this, and it's going to sound very redundant because I think Bridget's doing an excellent job of explaining what it is. No, but what I'm trying to reiterate that's already been said is we did have an opportunity to come together as a board and discuss what our goals and our visions were, and we did acknowledge at that time that it doesn't happen overnight, and there needs to be a system in place for getting that information out. And so I believe what is happening this evening is Bridget is explaining to us what that system is for her to bring it back to staff. We are only on September 25th. It's the very first month of school, so it's a little early to expect that all of the goals have been laid out just yet, which means there is still time to brainstorm and contribute. And I do believe that this is just a first step, that Bridget will come back to us, as she has mentioned about the mission statement and such, where we'll be involved. This will be a regular item that we can touch base on, and I think that we are excited to have Bridget's take on moving this district forward. So perhaps it might look a little different than what we had done in the past, but at this point, I don't even think we're at the place where you're speaking to. I think we're still in the beginning stages.
Understood. And I'm not criticizing Bridget. I'm not criticizing her methodology. I'm saying it would be nice if we were a little more involved.
I think we're as involved as we need to be at this moment, and when she's ready for us again, she'll invite us in.
I hear you. I'm voicing a separate opinion.
Understood. All right, is that okay, Bridget? Was that?
I did mean for this to be a discussion and for questions and feedback about the process, because that's how we've been doing it all along. So, Laura?
Just because we have done things a certain way in the past doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do them the exact same way now. I would suggest that there might be a way to update us on who the stakeholders are who will be involved going forward. This to me seemed like sort of more a basic overview of how far you've come already in the 6 months, which have flown by for some of us, but maybe not so quickly for others. And I do appreciate and value the time that we had with you. It seems like just yesterday that we got back hordes of notes from our meeting together at that reflection session. I am curious as to what the expectation will be going forward, given that we will be having all these budget meetings. How will the stakeholders be brought together, and what would be the process going forward for communicating the work that's being done? Because this is terrific, but it's really still in the early stages, it would seem. And you just had the administrative retreat. So maybe just what will be the plan going forward to incorporate all the stakeholders and tell us the timeline and all that?
Well, and so this is part of the reason we're having the conversation. Because I have an understanding, as much of an understanding as I can have from gleaning it from talking to folks here about how this was done in the past. It has not been done in quite some time. The strategic plan that we're living under actually expired 2 years ago, and the work for it was done well in advance of that. So consulting that, because as I said, it was done well and still makes sense, but trying to bring it up to date and the process along with it up to date, because again, in my view of the world, and from what I heard from you and from everyone that I've talked to, basically, in the district, from people who work here, again, people in the community, was that we needed to wrap our minds around a bigger picture and some specific steps to get us there. Not just the broad stroke, not just the specific school piece, but to have the big piece. And so, to reiterate, this is just taking you through beginnings, like I've said, of the thought process. I was starting to think through what this might look like for us to continue to get the stakeholder feedback, which is coming regardless. It's coming through you. Even in these meetings, it's coming through the conversations that you have every day, the conversations that I have every day, in a more informal way, right? And the surveys and the data and so on that I spoke to is the more formal way that we've been able to get it, and much of that is pretty recent. I didn't send more of it out because some of it has been done so recently before I came. So moving forward, the groups, to Houston's point, I recognize that we are approaching the get-go of this in a different fashion, but I believe we began approaching it differently from the first time we had the retreat together. And so to take it from you as the board to the staff as a whole, out to the community, back to you, is the way I see it working. What are the intricacies in between? I think those are conversations for us to have. Is that, as I said, I utilize some of the time that I'm out of the library to bring those people in, and you come along with me if you're available. We have some of those conversations there and get some feedback. Great. I have every one Friday a month scheduled with all the PTO leaders. I already had these conversations in big groups of parents, listening to them about where we are and where they'd like to see us go. And I've let them know that we are working on this together. I had some of these conversations at the library with the parents who came and asked what we were doing together to assess the situation and to move us forward. And I explained some of this process to date to them too, and folks were pretty receptive to that. So my thoughts are, back to the question that you're both asking in different ways, is let's have something to show for all of these discussions to be able to bring to people so that they're focused in the conversations that we have. That's my goal with this. We've taken in a lot of information, all of us. Let's put it together into something that represents what we've heard, and we can agree on that is what we've heard, and bring that back out to get the feedback and well, I'm really interested in X, in gifted education. Can you tell me where that lives here? I think that's the way we do it to get to that place. Jeff?
So I just want to be clear for all of us that when you say plan, because I wonder if that's the word that may be throwing us off. The plan's not going to be, we're going to implement these 5 courses. Right. It's going to be, here is our vision. And so when every time there's a proposal in front of us, whether it be a new curriculum, a new activity, a new club, we go back to our vision and go, how does this connect to our vision? And I think, I hear your concerns, we've had this conversation, but I almost think that's too specific to what I would expect to see in this.
Oh, I completely agree. And part of the process, what I go through in my head is, how is that advancing the goal? In theory, we've been doing that for the past 5 to 7 years.
Right. But I think it's so important, while there's the group of us here, at the same time you have all the educators, you have everyone else in the system, and it's so vital for whatever because we can lay out, here are your goals, go out and do them. But if they're not on that page with us,
it ain't gonna work.
Right.
Agreed.
And so we have to make sure we're all looking at the system the same way. That doesn't mean that we expect complete agreement, but we have to start that conversation. I think what the superintendent's trying to do is gather all those pieces so she comes back to us. It's not going to be we're going to implement X, Y, and Z, but here is the feedback we got from them. Here's what they would like to see, and let's then engage in that conversation at that point.
I completely agree. I also recognize that as a board, we have an obligation for the care and feeding of staff. And staff is going to advise us on what's possible, what's probable, where the emergencies are, how to implement specific things. But also, if they don't know that we have interest in particular things, they may not give that a thought. So I'm suggesting the feedback loop should be tighter. But I've said my part. So.
But I think there's a logistical, right? The staff just got here, right? And I think maybe it's because we had that meeting so early on, because we had a very detailed conversation about gifted, about all of our students and providing all those opportunities. And my assumption is that that's what the superintendent took back to the administrative team and then now just took back to the staff. And I think you're right. I think we're in that feedback loop. I think we have the disadvantage that we met so early on. Had we met in August, I don't think we would have felt so left out. I just think there's been no conversation until just now.
So I agree with you, but I think the question I have is, when I think of the budget that's coming up, and if our goal is December, I mean, are you picturing like the board participating in another workshop type of a thing, or is this? I'm trying to figure out like literal, actual logistics.
You and I both. To be perfectly honest,
okay.
Looking at our upcoming board meetings and trying to figure out, is that where we have the conversation? Do we need to get together before the board meeting? How does it fit into the finance committee meetings? How does it? But that's what to the point of the gap in time. That's what I've been doing since I got here, and hiring a myriad of people, and putting out the rest of the fires and so on. So
we may have to go through this budget process with a.
But the budget process is an implementation of our concept.
But we may have to go through this budget process with a basic understanding of our vision statement. We may not have enough time truly to craft that vision statement to where it needs to be because of the time constraints we have with the budget process.
That's what I'm thinking. Is it's going to be a really packed November, December, January. Anyway.
But I would rather take the time for us to clearly articulate our expectations and our goals. And if that unfortunately means we go through a budget process where we can make the best decisions based upon the group of us, our professional staff and their input, knowing that we've had these conversations, it should start to line up anyway. I don't want us to rush this statement development because we have the budget timeline.
No, and to be clear, that's why we're where we are. And that's why I wanted to pause tonight and do this update so you understood where we were. Because I could have very easily scheduled a meeting in June, put 30 people in a room, and gotten this done. That's not what I was interested in. That's not what you were interested in. Was what I heard from you. It's not what I heard from the staff. Let's have something that we truly put together and built together, all of us, that we can move toward. And that takes time, because that's why I'm talking to you tonight about developing this theory behind the how and the why we do what we do. If we're looking for ritual compliance, then I just get it done and I put it out there, and there's goals that have to be followed, and we can come and report back on it. I'm not looking for ritual compliance. I'm looking for people to be alongside of us and engaged in this process. And so I think two things are going to happen. We are going to go at this slower than you or I would like, one. Two, we are most likely going to come out this year with this year planned in front of us and be talking again in the spring about, you see, I said 2018 to 2021. To some degree, we're building this plane while we're flying it, right? So these conversations are governing the way, back to your point, they're going to meld anyway with the way we're doing business. And I would also just talk about the fact that while we may not have been explicit between us in always talking about what we are doing here together as part of our strategic planning, every time we've sat in this room together, this is what we've been doing. Because that is part of the feedback loop. It's part of the feedback loop from you to me, to the community, and to the people that work here about via the conversations that we've had. So, and the things that we've worked on. So that's all continually feeding through where we head.
And I say thank you and appreciate that, but also one of the things I'm trying to send back to the staff that I'm not sure they're getting is I want a component of this to be their dreams. I don't want to just simply say, here it is, this has now been put in your head. I want a concept for people to experiment, to understand it's okay to fail. I need people to understand I want a dream component. I understand that you can't have it, the whole thing be a dream component, but I want to water the flowers.
I completely understand that and agree.
Got it.
Thank you.
I'm happy.
Go back to my list of
Someone
dreams and
jot the time. Let me
aspirations.
jot down the time that Houston said he was happy. That needs to be in the minutes. He said he was happy. 8:37 on the 25th.
My work here is
Houston was
done.
happy.
Any other questions or comments? Because I feel like some of you I haven't heard from.
This is risky, but I do have a question. It sort of ties into what Houston just said about the whole dream aspect. When you went through these steps, I did have a question about generating a list of dreams and aspirations for our students, because it seems of everything you have on this plan, the most hugely subjective piece
Yes.
of it. And my question really is, do you generate that list by reaching out to students and actually trying to identify some dreams they may have, or are we trying to say, here's what your dreams and aspirations should be? Which is it?
It says 4, it doesn't say.
I know it doesn't, that's why I'm asking you a question.
So the way it's written there is to talk about a piece that Houston just alluded to also, that and that Jeff talked about. You know, there has to be some guiding force and some vision behind what we're doing here. That is our role as a board in setting the direction, right? And then it trickles down to the actual attributes of the graduates and how we measure our success by their success. So when we ask each other these kinds of questions when we're having these conversations, again, it's if our students were leaving here the best they possibly could, whatever that means for them, all of them, and we've had a lot of that kind of conversation, what would that look like? So one of the things we talked about as a dream or an aspiration for our students is that every student that comes through feels connected to the school district, to the school, to the teacher, right? Our students, whether or not they're able to articulate it, would tell us the same thing, right? That they're happiest when they feel that way. Something that's sometimes tough to measure, you get to it a little bit in the climate survey, but it's of the watering the flowers and trying to grow relationships and innovation capacity. So yes, it's coming from them via their voices to us, but also some of the survey data that we collect from students. But it's also, what do we hope for them? And how do we get there? Does that answer the question? Sort of?
Sort of. I mean, I'm going to oversimplify it, but to me, when you speak of a vision of your graduate here in Avon, and to me, the vision of the perfect graduate is giving these students the tools to meet their dreams and aspirations.
That's right.
I mean, that's what the vision should be.
That's right.
So identifying.
So how do we give them the tools?
Right. I mean, I get how it all ties together. I just am curious how, in order to effectively do that, we have to have an understanding of what our students' dreams and aspirations are and how different they are across the board.
That's right. Anyone else that do anything? Well, you asked me for a 10-minute. That's the last piece of that. Here we are. We'll be back again I'll keep updating you. We'll figure out how some of these sessions look in public, and we'll go from there. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just close the lid on that, Allison, it's fine, thank you.
Oh, no, you're fine. If I was gonna trip and fall down, it should have been before that happened.
Amir's got it.
If I had to do that and then trip and fall down, of course, behind me, sorry. Go ahead, Amir.
And some of these things are not necessarily things that are policy-wise. Like, when we talk about culture, there's no way of saying, well, if the board doesn't approve this policy, how we're going to bring culture into our school, then we're not going to do it. Some of the things are like, I don't know, so I feel like some of the things you can't make or vote on how school culture or climate can go.
You're right.
You know, like achievement you can vote on curriculum, but some of the things like you were talking about at the community meeting about more presence of the administration in the hallways and different things that they're doing now to show that they want to be connected with the students, and how do they go about doing that?
Right. And we talked about them as ripples in a pond for culture, right?
You know what, Amir? What you can say in terms of culture is you can say, as a district, we want all of our students to feel connected to the community, the school. We want all our students to feel like they belong. They feel they have a connection to an adult, to another peer. You're right, you can't legislate that, but we can make a strong statement that is our expectation when it comes to the school culture. But that could impact how we deal with other issues. So, example, if you could look at how we handle disciplinary issues, right? If there's a behavior that goes against our vision of school culture, of how we treat each other as humans, then that should dictate the punishment and the tolerance. And then how do we deal with that? So there are still some of those policy pieces that could be directed by that mission statement.
Yeah, and I just don't want a whole large component to be about that.
No, I agree.
We were talking about, you probably were at the community meeting, but what we were talking about in the community meeting was that, well, yes, we're having the administration do this. We're bringing the stuff that you guys do at the retreat, we're bringing it to the staff, and then from the staff, we're bringing it into the schools. What we don't want it to be is that that's happening, but then what about those students, the student connection? That's creating the culture in the school, because to be honest with you, if that's really what dictates, right? We won't have to go into the discipline if students, if that culture between students are actually happening and we're doing the things that we're implementing.
The committee meeting dates, I don't think that we really need to discuss that much about right now. We didn't finalize anything. It was still left just as an open discussion item. We have solidified the committee dates that we needed to, that some had to be rescheduled. Finance committee, also for the curriculum professional practices committee. Policy, I think we're still looking for one date to possibly pull away from the same night as one of the finance meetings, but we'll be back out to do that. Because again, we're looking at 2 very busy months trying to decide where some of those fit after the request to pull apart the Tuesday night policy and finance. If I may, through the chair, on the consent calendar, we have the approval of Avon High School new course recommendations that we had moved up from the Curriculum and Professional Practices Committee after the last meeting. Upon further conversation that was happening even before then and since with the administration, the high school, and the central office, we'd like to ask for that to be removed from the consent calendar as we get a better handle on the full program of studies and offerings at the high school before we move anything forward. I think we need more time for Mr. Rankowitz to be able to do that.
For a point of clarification, are you requesting that be
I'm requesting it be removed.
Pursued, or removed and pursued as a full agenda item separately?
No, I'm asking that it be removed and not pursued tonight.
And that's fine, any member, and I'll just make that my request. Then I would also suggest that add old business A through L to the consent calendar. Those are all second reads. I'm not aware of any discussion that's needed. So I would ask that those be added to the consent calendar as well.
Okay, well, before doing that, I think we might want to have some discussion on some. Laura, did you want to speak to any of those pieces?
The committee
has actually had several opportunities because Heather did so much research on this, and Shipman and Goodwin had weighed in. So from a committee standpoint, I would say that we are ready, but it is a lot of information. So if anybody else needed time to relook through them, that was why it was left the way it was as old business. But I appreciate Houston's intent, and
I think it's non-controversial. I don't think we need to discuss them.
I just want to ask if anybody has questions so we don't put it there in case anybody wanted to say something on a policy.
I'm good.
Okay, so then we will add, are you asking for all old business, Houston?
A through L and omitting D on the original consent calendar.
Okay.
So I'll make the motion to approve the consent calendar as amended, which consists of A, B, and C under the original consent calendar and A through L under the old business.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Jackie seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay. Thank you, Houston. That was
welcome.
very efficient. Now on to new business. The agreement for child nutrition programs, I'd like to invite Maggie Dreyer forward if you'd like to give information to the board.
This is the agreement for the child nutrition program. And we've been signing a form every year saying that we're going to participate in the National School Lunch Program and follow the state and federal regulations. And it has not been an action item for the board. Usually I just sign it and either Heather or the superintendent would sign it and it would be submitted to the state. They've updated the form because there's new programs. If you can see on the second page of it, it's not only the lunch program and the breakfast program, there's also the after-school snack program, the special milk program, and the seamless summer program, even though we don't participate in that, but they updated the forms to include that. So now each school district now has to re-sign these forms. The 3 authorized signatures have to be signed, and then it has to be submitted to the state. And basically, again, we are agreeing, or you will be voting to participate in the National School Lunch Program and follow the state and federal regulations. And then the authorized signature would be the superintendent, the business official, and the secretary of the board.
I think that there were a couple questions that Jason might have had.
I did have a question. It goes to, of those programs listed on here, how do we decide which ones we are participating in? And just to give you a little context, someone had asked me not too long ago about this, what they call this seamless summer option, which I assume is ongoing meal options through the summer.
It is, it's usually based on your demographic and need. So what we've been required to do is publicize where the summer programs are located. So there may be a citizen of Avon who would like to take advantage of it, and they would know where to go to get those meals. I don't think we have the participation or the demographic necessarily for that.
So that's how we would decide on participation, whether or not we thought it would essentially be a program that would be taken advantage of. Not to put you on the spot, do you happen to know in our area if there are any communities that have these seamless summer options?
Well, Hartford has many programs. I'm trying to think.
I think
Meriden, mostly your more urban areas, and some of your more rural areas also. But I would think Hartford is probably closest.
So if we thought we had a student here that might want to take advantage of that, we at least notify them of the availability.
It's put on our website every year.
Okay.
Okay, Jason?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll just say, beyond it being on their website, I hope we're also doing some proactive communication for parents, maybe through a social worker or school counselor or some other means, so that parents are aware of what's available to them.
There's a lot of different community organizations, as well as the information we put out. There is a very big push to get that information out to families.
Thank you, Maggie. So since Jeff will be signing this, I think we should vote to approve the agreement for child nutrition programs. Can I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, Houston moves. Do I have a second?
Second.
Laura seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, Jeff, you have the authority to sign.
For myself.
I don't know, is it here tonight or we have it elsewhere?
And, shall we grab it?
Okay, it's in the office.
I'll come by.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie.
It's a long day.
Christian, you didn't put you on consent. Then you would have said, why'd I come?
And it's okay to exit stage right, Maggie, I won't be.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, so now the Board of Education operating budget development timeline. Is this more informative for us, Bridget, that you would like us to, or do you need us to approve participation in it?
No, both informative and if you had any feedback or comments on it, we are, following the timeline that we're required to by the town and the charter, but also you note that as we had talked about at one point or another, we wanted to ensure that by the time the board was approving the budget, it was as late as it could be for us to do that, to have an accurate budget, and that was something that had been talked about. I had to have a conversation on the town side with Mr. Robertson about that, and we were able to put together this timeline that still met all of the requirements. But you see, we're talking in January, a special board meeting so that we have more solid numbers related to insurance and so on, for one thing. And Ms. Robertson and I both agreed that that would be helpful to us as a whole to be able to have a more accurate budget. Anytime you're doing it before the year is over, you never know where you're really projecting forward to some degree, because the numbers can change on you related to particularly pieces of insurance. But we should have more solid numbers then than we do in November, for example. Sorry, Laura.
Just a quick question for you. When would be an appropriate time for the finance subcommittee and all of us to take a look at fees? It's something that we talked about revising as it relates
go ahead,
to the
Heather.
budget development process.
It's on the agenda for October, that's what we had discussed, so that it would make it, well in advance, so we could have that discussion in October.
No, that's fine. We had that conversation in an earlier meeting to make sure we did it.
So I do appreciate that it does give a little more breathing space. Does any other board member have any questions, comments? So we can move along to the next item, correct? Okay. So now policy 4111, recruitment and selection, first read. Do we have any commentary? Laura, do you want to speak to that?
I think actually Bridget was going to speak to that one,
Okay.
to homework as well.
Thank you.
Well, only to go back to, so we have a clear understanding here at the table after the questions that Houston and I were discussing. So the red line version you have, note the paragraph that starts 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph, for positions not included in a collective bargaining unit. Superintendent of schools shall make recommendations to the Board of Education concerning the appointment and the terms and conditions for such positions. The appointment and terms and conditions for such positions shall be subject to the approval of the Board of Education. So this is where Houston and I were just talking about earlier that I thought we would put off so that we're all clear and on the same page. I read this to mean, and through our conversations about having this policy, to mean that initially when someone is appointed, that clearly we take them through. But in keeping in line with this policy, each year we have a conversation about wages and benefits and any other pieces that may need to be renegotiated, because some of these contracts, for example, are for 3 years, but we tend to negotiate increases in salary and or changes in insurance and benefits, so on, at the end of every year. My understanding of how we would do that together moving forward is that we'd have a conversation at budget time, and then at some time we'd have like we did earlier this spring, a strategy meeting, an executive session related to raises for individuals who are non-affiliated, and that you would give me the parameters to negotiate the contracts once again, as you did. And so for these reappointments, that's how I saw the process moving forward based on what we talked about. And as long as I stay within the parameters to negotiate the contracts as the agent of the board, they go on as information to you, not for a vote of approval when they're reappointments after you've given me the directions.
That's not what it says.
My understanding was that is what it said, and that's why I'm asking.
It's not what it says. So I'd be happy to do it that way.
However you want to do it doesn't matter to me.
But at the moment, this says it's subject to approval by the board, not subject to approval within the general parameters suggested by the board.
The appointments.
Right. And every time you reappoint someone, I think that's an appointment.
And that's why I wanted to have the conversation, because that's the...
Are you saying after, I just want to get clarification, are you saying at the end of the year you have a discussion about certain items in the contract that's not come to its...
As we did earlier, yep.
It's to its end, that's considered a reappointment?
They're not new people that we are hiring, so...
But for me, I would consider a reappointment the next re-up of that contract, but is that what this is? Am I just misunderstanding what a reappointment is?
No. So these contracts were renegotiated to begin again July 1st, 2018, all for current employees. Some of them were only one-year contracts for their employment. Most had provisions that the wages and the benefits were subject to renegotiation at the end of the calendar year, the fiscal year. And so I think that from an efficiency standpoint, the way I'm speaking to it works better for us and is what we talked about. But if we feel like the language here needs to change to reflect that, let's have that conversation or send it back to the committee. We can send it back on a first read, whatever you'd like to do, because as you said, the policy's not in effect yet. I still just put out.
I understand, and I think I might limit the scope of the policy a little bit more, but I think most of us would say that we want to actually approve.
You want to actually vote on the contracts every year?
That's my preference in light of prior history.
If that's the case, then let me play devil's advocate.
Sure.
Then why not just send it to the negotiations committee like all the other contracts?
Because
I'm clearly not in favor of that option.
I understand. You could do that. I'm not sure I would.
But that would fit, right? If that's what we're talking about, then the procedures in place that every one of these contracts, whether it be a secretary or so forth, would then have to be negotiated with the full negotiation committee. They would go through that process, come back and make that presentation like we would with all the other board contracts.
And I would say no. I think you would treat it like the equivalent of a procurement contract that is just subject to approval by the board at the end. And so I think in light of what I happen to be worried about, I think we should have our fingerprints on it and make sure that it's done appropriately.
Well, I understand Houston's concern, and I know about the issues that that we would not want to see recur. I could live with just having these renewals on the consent calendar, which to me would constitute sufficient notice. Yes, we would approve them or pull them from the consent calendar if we thought there was some sort of outlier in a particular contract that required all this discussion. But for the most part, we just need transparent disclosure of what's being offered, what's being granted, and to avoid surprises. And the consent calendar would do that. And it would be fairly efficient, too, because in most cases, we would look through it and say, yeah, that's within the framework that you were given to work with. And then we would simply approve it and move on. To me, that's the least amount of work to get the job done.
And I'm happy with that. I'm not suggesting otherwise. And I think this language allows that to happen. And I'd be happy to move to approve it and to waive the second read, which I think requires a 2/3 vote. And so I'll be happy to make a motion to that effect.
Can I ask a question? Or you've already had the motion on the floor? Sorry.
Well, if no one wants to second it, then you have no approval, but you can certainly raise the question.
Go ahead, Laura.
I just want to clarify that this language was given to the policy committee by Shipman and Goodwin, by our council.
After your conversation as a board with the council for heading forward, but I think this is more, I agree, you're right, but I think this is more about us looking for a way that it happens, and I was utilizing, frankly, the hiring report because it's where we did similar things. So I, to be honest, was looking at it almost in a consent calendar way because it was here. But if we want to list them specifically on the consent calendar and pull them off of the other, that makes perfect sense to me.
The history that you don't have is that we used to approve every hire and fire. My suggestion at the time was, we don't need to do that, because I don't want to be particularly in the business of hiring, firing secretaries, reassigning them, doing all that stuff. But in light of this, and in light of the problem that we've seen, I think we should have it, and the salient portion should be on the consent calendar. And if we know that there's a problem, we'll yank it and we'll talk about it.
Right.
But I want to avoid the board being put into a surprising situation. And the only way to do that is to say it's subject to our approval. Now, if other members of the boards don't like that, but this is what the policy committee, without my particular direct input because I missed it, said.
But the consent calendar would imply our approval, right?
Absolutely. It doesn't imply.
I mean, it is our approval.
Right. And it used to be the whole thing was specifically approved.
I'm curious, is that taking chances with personnel issues? Are we allowed to actually have people's names on the consent calendar as such without them being present and all of?
Yeah, that would be okay.
And we can say, their contracts are a matter of public disclosure. And so we can say, here's the contract that we're being asked to approve. All sorts of other contracts happen. I don't think it's a problem.
No, I don't think it's a problem either. It's just in how it looks on the consent calendar. So it's taking where I have it from the hiring report and putting it on the consent, calendar. And that 6 of one, half dozen of the other, I think to your point, the process is the process, and it is more clear there.
I'm concerned, and let's talk about it. But my motion has no second, so.
I'll second the motion.
Can you repeat that then? What are we changing in the language?
No,
We're not
changing anything.
The policy as written allows us to do exactly what we've been talking about. I would vote to approve the policy.
Let me ask.
Second the motion for the policy.
Why must the name appear on the consent calendar? We're not voting on people, we're voting on the title, right? Couldn't we just use the title?
I think that as a practical matter, what we have to do is we have to attach the contract.
Does the contract state
The contract will state the name.
the name directly?
Right.
The contracts are a matter of public record, and the names are on the
I
slide.
understand, but at the same time, there's a personnel matter, right?
We're not talking about evaluation.
I understand that, but at the same time, you're attaching an individual's name and their salary, and while that is public record, that anyone wants to know it, they can get it. Look, I'm a public employee. Anyone wants to know. I used to teach in a town where they used to list every teacher in the town paper at the time of budget referendum with their salary. It's a little off-putting, right? And at least I would like to see, as a matter of course, why not just simply reference the position they hold with us, the contract for this secretary?
We can work that out. The policy here doesn't require us to go either way with that.
Okay.
You could probably put the position and then attach the contract. So you'd have to really dig for it, so it wouldn't be just.
I mean, you show up at central office. Hi, I'd like to see this contract.
Well, actually, the Taxpayers Association a number of years ago requested, and the district was compliant in making sure that every contract is actually up online. So whether, it's a matter of public record, but it's a matter of also somebody being willing to go and dig for it.
Are we going to vote? Well, can I, just for clarity, hold on, just if we left it as it is on the hiring report like we have it, is there anything to stop a concern from being addressed at that time? Does it have to be?
Yes, because the policy says we have to approve it. Merely informing us of the issue is not adequate. And so we have to approve it.
So at the very least, it has to appear on
So
the consent calendar.
Right. So the superintendent, with all due respect, doesn't have the authority to consummate those contracts without our approval. And if the superintendent were to do so, it's ultra vires and the contract is subject to being avoided. And that's exactly what we wanted to have happen.
Because the hiring report is just a notification, it's not really, right, we're not really taking a motion, having a motion about a hiring. That's a benefit of the consent calendar, that we have more input kind of official.
The issue is because these are in non-bargaining units, correct? Because all the other ones that would appear on the hiring report are in bargaining units?
Correct.
There's two, I think we're ready to.
We can vote on this.
One last piece for clarification. This is how we all understood it. We did have a conversation about where to put it. We weren't clear in the end. So I put it here so we could have the conversation. One, that's why I created the new section. I agree that it goes on the consent calendar. I think I suggested that a long time ago, but it seemed not to be what we wanted to do. So I'm back to that. I think that works. And I want to be clear too, because if someone's sitting at home watching this, they think that they may think that some huge issue was created by the superintendent in these contracts. I want to be clear that's not the case.
No.
that this is actually about I and us trying to figure out how to be transparent about the appointment of all of these staff besides just putting them on a website. And so this process has come full circle to here. And I agree with what we've decided, and I think that I've acted as you have instructed me to do as an agent of the board the way that I should to negotiate these contracts. And as you know, all of these I did with the parameters that were set. I just want to be very clear publicly about that.
We appreciate that.
No, and you're right.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Just say thanks and let's move on. It's 9:00, whatever.
All right, so there's a motion and a second by Jay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously to go on to the consent calendar.
Wait, we have two more though.
Yes.
We've got use policy 144.1 and homework policy.
And you wanted me to speak to these, correct, Laura?
Well, do we need to?
This is very easy.
Actually, I have comments.
Go ahead.
Okay. The language is relatively minor, and I will mention to you that on page 101, the word student is misspelled. I'm sure that's a regulation, so you'll catch it when you punch in the spell checker. But I do have a problem with the policy language, the phrase, and accompanying regulations and applicable law.
Where are you?
Page 98.
Okay.
The actual policy itself, I think is inappropriate because it raises questions and suggests that we need to approve the accompanying regulations. We do not approve accompanying regulations. So that whole clause, that dependent clause, should be out. And if we say applicable law, do we have to redo this every time the law changes? The law is going to change October 1st. We're trying to be proactive. So I would move to approve the policy, not the regulations, because we don't approve regulations, and omit the phrase and accompanying regulations and applicable law under paragraph 98, and to also waive the second reading and have it be effective immediately in light of the superintendent's concerns that we have appropriate language in place by the effective date, which is in 7 days. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Is that still going to work?
Yeah, it's up to us to enforce the regulations. It's just spelled out more clearly, like always. So that's fine. This was what was suggested to us, so it's fine.
Okay.
All right, do I have a second?
I second.
All right, Jason seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Okay, and now the homework policy.
So, no surprise to the board, this council and committee began working on these guidelines, the policy and the accompanying guidelines well before my time, I believe the first conversation we had through a policy committee about this was March. They met several times, and it had taken nearly 2 years, at least 18 months, to put these together. They did extensive research, as we've previously discussed. They surveyed parents, students, and staff over the course of that time. They provided us as a policy committee suggested revisions to the policy and the regulations. The regulations were written specifically for grades K to 6 and grades 7 to 12. And I'd say the more radical changes from the committee were at the elementary grades. The recommendations include K to 2, eliminate all written homework and replace it with reading and ongoing practice related to schoolwork.
Can you just want what page you're on?
I'm just giving some highlights related to the.
It's actually from the email. It's from the email we sent.
I'm just speaking to the highlights of the policy. I don't want to read you the entire policy, so I'm reading some highlights that we put together. In grades 3 to 6, homework is broken into 3 categories: ongoing practice, written assignments, and long-range assignments, with a specified number of written assignments per week. And then at the secondary level, the recommended homework is to be assigned that provides students adequate time to complete and not be given, and also not be given during vacation periods or over long weekends. This is potentially challenging with the rotating schedule at the high school, the way they have classes every other day, but we're counting on working together to make this work. The guidelines for effective homework assignments and responsibilities of parents were also included as a result of the parent communications in this committee. So what we spent a lot of time talking about in both the policy committee and the curriculum and professional practices committee during the time that I have been here for certain and a part of those conversations, but also prior to that, would be that, one, the regulations, as Houston just mentioned, are really where the meat of our implementation is, and they are not approved by the board. But these were important for us to have conversations about and ensure that everyone understood. That said, I would say I would never expect one of these policies to be perfect, and that upon implementation, we are going to need to revisit it. We've had a lot of people at the table having this conversation to put these guidelines into effect. Now we need to implement them, convene again, and look at it toward the end of the school year, get more feedback from teachers, students, and parents about how they are working and how they are being implemented. And if we need to make changes again, then I think we make changes again. But this has been through many iterations to get here to you this evening to be able to move on.
Any questions? Jed?
I mean, one of the words you stressed is the long weekends. I just want to understand the background and how that got in place, and if anybody have further thoughts about how that can be implemented, because I can see it being a challenge at the high school, especially with A and B days, and there having to be homework over some long weekends.
Do you want to speak to that, Dr. Nessel-Rusak? Because you were involved in a little bit more of those conversations. He's asking specifically about the long weekend provision and how that came into effect.
I actually, unfortunately, did not attend the meetings of this particular committee, so I just came on board when it was presented at the curriculum professional practices and the homework policies. I really have to go back to members of the committee to answer that effectively.
My understanding from the same conversations, Mr. Spivak, though, is that we're looking to obviously not only honor the previous policy, which talked about religious holidays, for example, but to give students and families more time on all holiday weekends. That was part of the conversation that was discussed with me, and part of the concern that parents and students alike raised. And also, I think the second part of your question is related to how it might actually be implemented at the high school. So can you just speak a little more specifically to that so I can make sure I answer you appropriately?
I look at it as a challenge to implement the policy, given that we have A days and B days, and teachers have to keep assignments on certain rotations.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we talked about in the in the Curriculum and Professional Practices Committee and also in the Policy Committee was the fact that we might have to be reasonable in our implementation and see how that piece plays out with the rotating schedule in some of these courses. But our teachers were on board with, so for public consumption, if my class meets on Friday, the high school may not meet again right until Tuesday, but then there was a holiday weekend, maybe now it doesn't meet until Wednesday, and there's really an elongated period of time with the rotation of the days. And so we know that's going to be a challenge, but we have spoken about it in trying to have teachers plan out those kind of assignments and make sure kids have and students have enough advance notice so that they don't have to do them at the last minute over those sorts of weekends. That's the best piece of the conversation, to be perfectly honest, that we've had about it at this point without seeing it actually go through implementation.
I don't think it'll happen this year, but in a future year, you might look at how the schedule rotates and design that with the homework weekend scenario in mind, because there's more than one way to do schedule rotation, and it might be possible to come up with a way that is fairer or just more consistent across the board to avoid those outlier situations where a class doesn't meet for several days, and then the homework becomes a problem because of policy compliance issues and so forth.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to chime in. I have some very strong feelings about this, but I don't want to undermine all the work that's been done, considering I'm coming to this so late. I actually think, though, the point you raised is about the rotating schedule is, in my mind, if the class meets on Friday, Monday's a holiday, you don't meet them again until Wednesday, the teacher should be able to assign homework over that weekend because they can do the homework Tuesday night into Wednesday. In addition, it goes back to what my concern really is, that my hope would be that there is a purpose for all the homework assignments given, and that it is the teacher's professional opinion that this work needs to be done at this point in the pacing in order to move forward. And if that just happens to fall over Columbus Day weekend, that then impacts the teacher's ability to effectively deliver the curriculum. And I just get concerned about limiting this teacher's ability to deliver that curriculum to our expectations. In addition, there are some real things that stick out to me in terms of what are we defining as a holiday? Whose holiday? My holiday, your holiday, other holidays? What is the scope of the holiday, right? Many religions have a variety of holidays. We have a variety of religions in this community. Do we say, all right, this week, this religion, we can't assign any homework to anyone? I would rather leave it in the hands of the professionals, the teachers, as long as the homework has a purpose that's directly related back to the curriculum. I'll always come back to that point. To use their best discretion to give homework when necessary. And that may honestly, look, in advanced placement courses, we've had these conversations, advanced placement courses, ECEs, you can't turn around and say you can't give homework over winter vacation. The pacing guides don't allow it, right? Then at the same time you make the argument, well, then you can't give summer assignments, right? If there's an educational purpose, I think this is going to tie the hands of our teachers. I'm not going to vote no because I don't want to undermine all the work and I don't know all the discussions.
It's not up for a vote.
Okay.
Well, one of the pieces I would say is the policy itself doesn't speak to those points. That's regulations where those pieces come in. Am I correct on that? As far as holidays and such. So we're voting on the policy and the work that was done by that committee. It was asked that we do vote tonight, Houston, because the year has already begun and they're looking for guidance on what to do moving forward. So I would like us to take action on this tonight. Does anyone else have any questions? Laura?
Not so much a question, just to point out that in the past, we've had many people express concern about students being assigned homework on religious holidays. So the intent was to follow the ones that the district is following. It would be very hard to come up with a plan that would recognize any and all others, but the intent really is there to make sure that we observe and honor those religious and or other holidays that we have agreed to that are on the calendar.
I just look, we have a growing Hindu population in town, right? We see across the state a rising Muslim population, right? And there are holidays that I think we maybe even as a community may not be informed upon. And I would just like to make sure all of our students are treated equally.
This policy may have to evolve over time to match what happens with the holidays and our attempts to implement it as written now. To me, though, the holidays are the smaller portion of this. The larger portion is what Jeff talked about before, was the academic necessity for the homework in the first place. And to change teachers' way of thinking, or to give them a chance to reevaluate the significance of the homework and the need for it and the quantity of it, to make sure that everything that's being assigned is truly necessary for the academic progress that students are trying to achieve. I was a bit concerned in that we had some quantifiable limits to homework, and it's almost impossible to implement those in the high school because of the schedule and the classes and so forth. And so I noticed those upper limits are gone. But I'll also point out for the record that we've eliminated any minimums as well. And so coming out of this meeting, should this policy pass, the word needs to get back to the teachers is that there is no such thing as a minimum homework level that must be achieved. It's what's academically necessary to operate the course. And that's, for the time being, that's left open to the teachers because they're in the best position to make that determination. If not enough of them are getting the message, then maybe future policy will be more precise in defining what these limits are. But this is, for now, the best we can do.
I don't have a problem with the policy itself. It's the regulations. And I understand we don't vote on regulations.
Exactly.
I get that. But at the same time, you provide us the regulations to get an understanding of how the policy is going to be implemented and enforced. So if this is truly the way this policy is going to be enforced, I have real problems with the policy. That's my issue. Because we're saying this is how you're describing to me. So does this mean that if my child comes home with homework over a holiday, I can call the principal and complain and say, no, my child's not going to do the homework because it's on a holiday, and my understanding of the regulations of this policy is that's not the case.
Yes, but that's the way it is right now, I'd say too, Jeff. Our current policy. It's specific to the holidays, I mean.
Or the long weekend, right? Columbus Day weekend's coming up, right? And again, I would want the question, well, why is this necessary at this time? And I would hope that the parent, if there's a real reason why that child cannot complete that homework, the parent would reach out to the teacher, and the teacher should be accommodating depending upon the circumstances. I'm just afraid the way the regulation reads is that we're stripping the teachers of the ability to make their professional judgment on the purpose and the necessity for these assignments.
So what we were reminded of on numerous occasions throughout the presentation that was given, and as part of our discussion, is that we have no control truly over the regs. That is really something that's up to the administration and the building principals.
That would be my
teachers.
feedback to the administration then.
Weren't the teachers involved in this?
Yes.
Yes.
So the teachers like these regulations?
They wrote, the committee of them wrote them.
I would move to table. I don't see any reason that we have to violate our policies by doing this now. The school year has already started, and I don't see this as an emergency compared to the other ones.
I don't have a problem voting on it now. Given my feedback, the policy as written, I'm fine with.
I understand. I made a motion to table. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, can I, now that it's on the floor, I just want to remind you that we have begun a school year where you have staff that are confused as to which to enforce, so they're still under the old time limit constraints versus what we're trying to implement after 2 years of work.
Point of information.
About some discussions that happened in the policy committee meetings when we discussed this policy. One of the things we really talked about was the regulations were kind of, I don't want to call them a work in progress because that's not fair. We were going to keep a close eye on how these regulations are being implemented once this policy was adopted. I think with the expectation that the regulations are probably along the course of time going to need some tweaks to make this work for the teachers, for the students, and to be consistent with the policy. The discussions we had in the policy committee meetings were to, again, keep a close eye on it. My expectation was we would get an update as to how this policy and regulation was going in the schools, either through the policy committee in the near future or here in a full board meeting. But I think I'm in favor of moving this forward, but with like the concerns Jeff brought up, they're all legitimate concerns, and we need the administration to keep a close eye on this. You know, keep an ear to the ground on how it's going in the schools, and report back to us with questions, comments, suggested changes to the regulations. In my opinion, that's how we should move forward.
Does the current policy have time limits, or is that the current regulations assigned to the current, or is it the regulations assigned to the current policy?
The regulations.
So then the issue is not the policy in place to, right, that shouldn't be a concern for the teachers, right? Because your concern is teachers want to know in terms of time constraints and so forth. That's in the regulations. Do we have to act as a board to change the policy in order for administration to change the regulations, since we don't vote on regulations?
The answer is generally no, but since we're talking about a motion to table, I would just point out that this one seems to have raised concerns among board members. I suspect it's going to raise concerns among the public that if we were to waive our usual procedure and proceed when there is no other basis to do so, the public may view us as trying to railroad this through. I think that's inappropriate, which is why I moved to table.
Well, my concern is to address the chair's point regarding the school year and the teachers need direction.
Too late. I mean, it's too late in the year. We've started already.
I understand that point too.
And so I don't think that we really need.
On whether or not whether I would support the motion to table or the motion to move it forward, I'm just trying to get a sense, right? If the concerns are on the regulation side, do we truly need to act on the policy, or can we just have the regulations change?
Well, we don't change them, the superintendent.
That's my point.
But I think that the problem is that this is complex enough that we should do our usual viewing it twice and discussing it twice.
But the policy, it's not complex, right? It's the regulation.
The policy is short.
Right.
But we also may say some parts of what currently appear in regulations ought to go up.
But we don't vote on regulations, is what I keep being told.
We can say instead of having a regulation, we want to put it in the policy. So your issue may be that Sukkot is an appropriate holiday where people shouldn't have homework over it. Well, I'm raising the question. You may not be that observant. Most people don't know what Sukkot is. Okay, fine.
Sukkot, that's all right.
All right. Yes, but you know that's a legitimate holiday, and so I think that this is something that requires further reflection. I wasn't at the policy meeting where it was reflected upon.
I think my question is, how different is the wording of the policy, this one, to what we currently have in place?
Don't know. It's not a red line.
It's nearly the same.
So then there's no reason to table the policy. We just give direction to get the regulations sorted out.
Well, more in light of your concerns, we may want to put it in the policy.
Okay, Jay has a comment.
I think there's a couple of things. Go ahead, Jay, go first, and I'll go.
Yeah, I actually agree with Houston's rationale for tabling it, because I don't think us tabling a vote on the policy, because there's no compelling reason to vote tonight when we normally do a second read, whereas we still are allowing the administration to change the regulations, which we don't have any control over anyways. So us voting on or not voting on the policy, I don't think changes their ability to enact the regulations they think are appropriate, as long as they're following the policy we have in place.
My point, it seems like a short policy, but it's pretty significant. So, and I know there's been a lot of iterations, and I think during one of those iterations, one point came up in terms of flexibility. So back to the point we made about giving teachers opportunity for addressing students' needs. It says here, elementary school written assignments will not be assigned to students in kindergarten through second grade. If you have a second grader who would thrive and would be inspired and would have a joy and passion for learning, like our guide, like our mission statement says, and would want to do that, where's the opportunity for that extra optional quote-unquote homework? Does it not fall under the homework purview?
That's a regulation, not a policy.
I think that's where there is still perhaps a lack of clarity on what it is that we have the capacity to vote on versus what we do not as a policy committee.
I have no problems with the wording of the policy. I have problems with the regulation, and I've given my feedback.
The
So,
regulation is a result of 2 years of work.
and that's why.
I'm asking, is this the new one that we got tonight, this is a result of 2 years of work that's been worked on with the teachers, the staff, the administration, and students?
And parents.
And parents? And they all like this?
Well, I don't know, I can't say that everyone likes it. I guess I could.
This is what they have.
I can say that that's what was brought forward, yes. And to the point of, just to be clear, I think we are all clear that we vote on policy, not regulations, but in a policy such as this, the regulations, like most policies, go hand in hand. And so if we're going to vote on a policy tonight, but say, go ahead and do what you want with regulations, frankly, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think the administrators or the teachers would be either, because the whole purpose of bringing both to the board is so that we could have a conversation and we would all, be on the same page. So I don't have an issue with it either way. To be clear, this was to be a first read. I did ask, because it is the first time it's the full board, I did ask, and part of this was at the request of our building administrators, our teachers, a lot of conversations that have been going on in the buildings about, we're not sure which regulations you want us to follow. And so we're just kind of stagnant right now, waiting for you to bring this to the board, and we left it at that. So that is the reason it was my recommendation that if we were going to move this forward, we voted on it tonight, because there's still enough time in this school year to enact these regulations, reconvene in the spring, look at them again, look at them over time, and so even before then, and decide how they're working. If we table it, I think it would then only be fair that we leave it, and I'm not going to enforce the new regulations over the course of the school year, because then they wouldn't have enough time to give it its due process. And so whichever way we go, that'll be I think, decide for
Or
us.
at the break of a semester instead of the middle of a semester, which would actually make more sense and allow us to vet the process in such a way that people understand it. So
it's tonight or next year?
Well,
Is that where we are right now?
I think we could do it in December.
I think that's unfair to the teachers.
I don't think our teachers would. I think that'd be a problem for our
I'm trying to
professional
interpret
staff.
what you just said. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, so we're all talking the same language. It's not about an ultimatum before now we're past the policy and the regulations.
And can I just point out too, we've had 2 reads at a policy level, including a very long presentation.
I just don't want to enforce them, 4 months into the school year is what I'm getting at, because they won't be done with fidelity, and then we won't really know how it worked, and we won't be able to speak appropriately to it. Another option we could do, and this hadn't been talked about, but we could pilot these and see what they look like out in the district with people that are willing to pilot the new regulations and have the conversation that way versus the way that it was. But, to be perfectly frank, one of the conversations we've had over and over in my time here, at least in both of the committee meetings, was the regulations are only as good as them being implemented and supervised and revised. And so I can't sit here with certainty tonight and tell you that the previous regulations were enforced for however long they've been in effect.
Well, implementation is everything, as you say. And there were some limits in the old regulations that were not enforced for sure, and because we learned that really they couldn't be enforced. I would be okay with moving on this tonight only because we know that this is a work in progress. We know we're going to get more parent input. If we take a look at it next spring to review how it's working, then we're really looking at our implementation to see what has to change with that. One of the big concerns I had with this policy in the first place was that if nothing changed regarding the quantity of homework that was assigned, and if nothing was done to look at the appropriateness of the homework for the curriculum, that this policy as written now would allow us to continue the status quo and change virtually nothing. And that's what some of the parents might be concerned about. There's the possibility that it may be implemented very well, and there may be substantial changes in the way homework is assigned. And that would be a good thing. I'm hoping that's the result that we get. Implementation determines which of those 2 outcomes we're going to have, not the policy itself. So that's why I was okay with passing it, because we know that in the spring we're going to have to review this anyway, just to look at how the implementation is going.
I just want to clarify the regulation versus policy, because this categorically states grade assignments will not be assigned beginning or to students in kindergarten through second grade. Categorically just says that. So does that mean a second grader who would want to do a project on panda bears or tigers or whatever would not be allowed to do that?
I don't think you can stop a child from doing something. It's more the class wouldn't be assigned something. But if a student were compelled, I'm sure if a teacher wants to inspire, they could certainly offer enrichment materials.
They get in trouble for doing that.
I think, thank you for asking. I appreciate you bringing it up before too, Bogdan. I think my understanding, again, of the committee work, not having been a part of it, but the conversations at the end were, yes, it's regulations. If you look throughout the policy, they're guidelines. The word is used, guidelines, throughout for the professional staff to implement. And I would think that, back to Jeff's point too, we expect our professional staff to be able to implement these in a way that makes sense. It's hard to accommodate every eventuality. We could add a line in, for example, and I don't see any reason we wouldn't do this, you having brought it up, that for enrichment activities at any grade level, something might be assigned to be done at home or even volunteer to be done at home by a student. And I don't read that this prevents that when we're talking about
But
that kind of work.
My son has always had homework, right? He brought home first grade, second grade, it may have been just copying letters, writing a sentence. That meets this definition of a written assignment, right? I mean, that meets this definition. And in my opinion, and I don't have a background in elementary education, but that made sense, that it was a reinforcement of the activity of the day, and it wasn't optional. The student was expected to bring it back. So why couldn't that? Why are we exempting kindergarten, first, and second grade from bringing home any sort of homework?
It doesn't say any homework, it says
written
homework.
Right. So when my son used to come home, words, sentences in second grade. Well, I don't understand why that would not be. Why is that not educationally acceptable?
I think the information that was provided to us by Jess Giannini as one of the leaders of the group was that the research done at that age level showed that homework didn't necessarily benefit the students in any real impactful way. It wasn't something that was necessary for them to grow and prosper and move forward in their education. So why enact it at that age level when they could be focusing on reading and enjoying information in a different light?
Okay.
And that's for the typical student perhaps, but I'm sure there are some students who would benefit from that. So we can't say all students would benefit from this approach.
But I think if the teacher is engaged with the student, then that conversation would happen with parents and students, and then enrichment can be provided so that they can have more to build on at home. So I don't think this is meant to be punitive to teachers if they're offering enrichment to students.
There obviously must have been an issue, or else I don't think this would be so such a point of discussion. I'm assuming there was an issue with the amount of homework and the timing at the elementary level.
I had no problem with my son's homework.
I know you don't, and I don't have kids in elementary school, but it's amazing. I mean, we did have these professional people who are more equipped than I am who spent 2 years of their lives doing the very best job that they could. So I do want to kind of respect that. I mean, you know, the experience I have is as the mom trying to get the kid to do the homework, and maybe in some families it's more fun, and some families it's not. In my family it wasn't, but it sounds like for other people it was.
It wasn't fun in our house.
So I think, I don't know, I guess I'm concerned that we ask these people to do this time-consuming and hefty project for us. I'm assuming they would do reacting to things that people brought forward, and
I think my concern is that a second grade teacher sends home homework that they feel is educationally necessary, and then all of a sudden they're getting a letter in their file because they broke regulation. Because you keep using the word enforcing. But where is it that we take in the professional consideration of the teachers? Right? If there's an educational need, and again, I would have to go back and look at look at the curricular documents and so forth. That's my concern about being so restrictive. I think if there's an issue where there seems to be an abuse, where a teacher is just assigning war and peace to a second grader, then I would expect the administration to take the appropriate action. But I would assume that
So what's the downside of piloting this? I mean, what's the downside of doing that? Of saying, this is where, we respect the work that you've done, because there are a bunch of teachers on this committee. We respect the work that you've done, and we'd like to give it a try this year, because it does sound punitive. I mean, it does. I don't think any of us want that. I think that's probably what the board has anxiety about, is that we don't want to be in a position where we put any teacher or administrator in an uncomfortable situation because we decided to write up the whole 3 pages of new regulations, after the school has started. So I don't know what the downside to piloting this would be if we just say, this is the work that's come out of this committee, well, let's try this year, and then next year at this time we say, wow, here were the glitches, here were the wins, and here's our new policy.
So the downside I see is those 3 or 5 or 20 kids who want to do that extra paper on tigers don't seem to be allowed to do that with that.
But what I'm saying, if we're piloting it, we're taking out the punitiveness, right? And if anybody wants to do, like, my kid can always do extra work if he wanted to, and it doesn't say your child is not allowed to go home and do research.
Will not be assigned.
No, but your kid can still go home and do research at his own home, or at the library, or, right? I mean,
But probably couldn't share it in the classroom based on this policy.
I think they were saying that
the enrichment isn't required, right? The idea of homework is that the teacher says all students will do this, and there's a penalty if you don't do it, right? So it appears in the report that they haven't done the work. If a child wants enrichment, or if a teacher provides enrichment, that's not prohibited in this policy. Or this regulation, I'm sorry, I want to use the right
This
word.
policy doesn't really address that issue, and maybe for good reason.
Right.
I would go with the way, it took me a while to warm up to what's in here, because I was hoping for more of a substantial change, but then I realized that the change could really come from the implementation, not so much the policy itself. So on that basis, I looked at it with a new light, and if we take what the teachers have given us, I'm reticent to change what they've given us because they put in all their work into this. Ultimately, they have to live with this policy. They have to implement it. So it's better if such policies do come from the people who are implementing it. So I'm inclined to give them their chance to do exactly that, and then we can look at the results and see what we're getting out of this later on. But that's how I came around to accept what they've given us, because we can still achieve our goals, and it doesn't prevent us from doing that. And meanwhile, the people who are going to implement this are the exact people who gave us these words on paper. If we start reinventing this, first of all, where does it end? And we will lose the teachers, because once we dictate to them, then they will rebel. Whereas I would prefer that we take what they've given us and run with it.
Can I make a suggestion to at least go back to Bogdan's piece about the enrichment and so on? I don't see anything that necessarily prevents it in here, Bogdan, either, but I do, I agree with you in the piece that we want to be able to allow some of that to happen. So I don't see any problem with, again, we're not really voting on the regulations. I have no problem with having a conversation, and I don't think any teacher would, for the most part, either. A line that says something to that effect in the regulations. I don't see any issue with that at all. I don't think they prevent it, but to make it more clear, I think that 90%, if not all, of our professional staff would agree with you that there are times that it might be beneficial in some occasions with our younger children.
Okay, so at this point, we have the motion to table. Did you have one more comment?
I do. I admit I'm completely confused because we are tabling we have a motion to table the vote on the policy, but I don't think the existing policy prevents the administration from implementing any of the regulations, unless you're telling me otherwise.
That was my question.
I'm sorry, Bogdan.
The problem is we don't have the existing policy in front of us. But if it's very similar to this one, if we don't vote tonight on the policy because we normally wait until second reads, how does that prevent you from implementing the regulations that you think are appropriate with the input that you've received tonight from the board?
We could move ahead and do that. I just, from the perspective of honoring the committee's work too, the Curriculum and Professional Practices Committee heard this at least twice. They moved it to the policy committee, and the policy committee moved it as a whole to be discussed here tonight. So I just don't want to do something that's not honoring the work that, to the point about what the staff did, but also with what the board did. If you make a decision not to vote on the policy, and what we're talking about here is still being on board, so to speak, with moving these regulations forward regardless, and making a couple of adjustments to them, I can see us doing that, but I get, they went hand in hand through the process. So I just want to not do what's not expected of us to do as a result of the committee work and so on. So I'm happy to move them forward and pilot them with some changes if you're not willing tonight to vote on the policy. I just think at some point we have to marry the two back together.
And I would say, in recognition of the work that they did do, the wording of the policy, I think, is very clear in the mindset that we have presented of what we're hoping for from our staff with our students. It says within a reasonable time frame. I think that's a logical response to students may do things at a different pace. Reasonable. Aligned with learning objectives, clearly communicated, meets the needs of all learners, which I think speaks to Bogdan's concerns, supports students in their acquisition of knowledge and skills, again to Bogdan's concerns, and I think even what Jeff was saying, is comprised of previously taught content or builds a foundation for future success. The wording of this policy to me speaks very clearly that we're moving in a positive way to reject moving this forward with the new regulations and instead attach it to the old homework policy. I think neglects that parents have come forward upset about the homework and how it was implemented here. So if there's no change in it, what are we saying as a board? That we don't agree that maybe our homework policy was a bit archaic and we didn't need any updating on it, but let's change all the regulations? Or do we as a board want to acknowledge the work that was done by staff and research was done and lots of conversations took place and we know better than what they did?
Is it fair? We have a 10 o'clock deadline.
Is it fair to say that regulations are easier to change than policies?
Yes.
So the strict policy of saying assignments will not be assigned to students K through 2 is a policy.
That's a regulation, that's not a policy.
The only part of the policy is page 104.
Page 103.
Actually,
page 103.
Three.
I'm sorry, and mine is 104. Pardon me.
Oh, and the question is, we may want to take some of those items out of the regs and put them into the policy.
The anxiety I think that we have is that we're going to strike fear in every teacher that comes to school tomorrow who's going to now have to, might accidentally assign something over somebody's holiday. I mean, I don't know.
I don't think that we're in a situation where it's as punitive as what you're predicting. I think that it's still a breathing document and it's a work in progress. I personally do not want to table it, and I know that's on the floor, so I think we have to act on that. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? Okay, Jay.
I think the concern and why we want to table is because we don't want to be in the habit of pushing things through too fast. And we have a first read, we didn't give the public an opportunity to see that it was a first read and show up at our meeting as many people do. And I just think it's not good practice to continue to do that. I guess, we're hearing from administration that this is a special situation just like the other two. So I'm willing to go along with that and not table it, but with the understanding that this is not the way we normally act.
I have the sneaking suspicion that the teachers in the district have been operating under the assumption this is going to get adopted. My gut tells me that having 2 students in the school system. So that's just my gut feeling.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh my God, you should have said that very first.
Yes. So Houston has moved to table this. Bogdan has seconded it. Do all in favor of tabling this? Houston? Any opposed?
Opposed.
Aye. Is that everyone? 1, 2, 3, 4.
but you.
So any, I don't know about you.
Tabling it?
I opposed to tabling.
Opposed to tabling it, yes.
So it's.
All right, and then
1 to
any,
8.
no abstentions? So 1 to 8. Okay, so now I would like to make a motion to move to pass this.
I second.
Okay, Jay seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed?
Houston opposed, any abstentions? So 8 to 1, it passes. Okay, thank you. Now, communication from the board. I think we've talked a lot. Does anyone have anything else to say?
I just wanted to reiterate thank you to Liz Briscoe and whoever else makes this program, and Mr. Rankowitz. It was really exciting to walk through the hallway today. I mean, I was,
that was good.
it was really, I wish we had like TV cameras there because these kids are amazing. It's such an exciting program that Avon has. The internship program, yeah, it was really
It's
fantastic.
very impressive. It's hard to walk back in here and listen to every student. They do such a good job. Thank you, Becky. Anybody else?
Through the chair, one
Yes.
clarification. Just want to make sure, I don't know that I said this earlier, because I want to address Mr. Spivak's point about bringing things through, respecting the first and second read process, which is part of what I was saying through the committees. This policy aside, we were looking to move this for the reasons we talked about, how many conversations we already had. The other two, the statute changed, and it was retroactive to July 1 by state law. So the policies that were brought this evening about physical force, specifically, and there's some others coming up the pike that are still our first reads because they're so dense, they also changed July 1st. So like the health screening that we have on as a first read and so on, we were really looking to move forward too, but also recognized how dense that policy was. And so we left it, and we are trying to implement it even the statute requirements before it gets there. So I just wanted to address the concern that we do have to make sure that we follow the process. Unfortunately, sometimes our legislators in Hartford don't give us the ample time to ensure we can follow our own processes, because when we get updates to law in August that are retroactive to July 1st, we have a problem with getting policies enacted. So I do appreciate that we were able to move them through the policy committee and the board here tonight so that we could be compliant with state law. So your point, well taken. I just want to be clear that sometimes, unfortunately, that's the position the legislature leaves us in.
Thank you. So for those of you in the viewing public, now is your opportunity. If you'd like to communicate with us at this time, you're welcome to do so. Please come forward. Yes, for the record. Make sure everybody knows your name.
Steve Mensch, resident at 34 Avon, Sudbury Way. Just the headline is security, just kind of edit to the security post that would be put up at the high school here, at the middle school, being too spread out. Also check Thompson Brook. I could drive a Suburban through those as well.
Do you have it?
I do.
Sorry, you know something that I don't.
I got a hold of Miles while we were all having that discussion, and the reason why all the buildings have an opening in the middle section was apparently they were measuring or something like that, and that is going to be removable, that middle one, so that's coming in for all the buildings. So they are aware that there's the ability to drive a Suburban through. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mensch. Anyone else? All right, so, oh, sorry. Yes, Erica, please.
I don't know if it's entirely appropriate to bring us up here, but.
Just say your name once more
Sorry.
further.
Erica, I think. So I don't know if you're aware that the middle school, they repaved and created a curb completely around the athletic fields, so they're no longer handicap accessible. And I do know directly someone who's affected by that, who every Sunday can't take his son to flag football. So I just wanted to make you aware that that's an issue and hopefully it can be addressed.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go back. We were lucky enough to partner with the town crews from DPW, and so something must have gotten lost in the shuffle there when they came, and we'll revisit it tomorrow. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Motion to go into executive session.
Okay, we will be discussing an update on contractual negotiations and invite Dr. Carmola in with us as well as Ms. Mashad. Okay, so at this time, we can move in, but we'll take a brief recess. Do you want to take a vote on that? Okay. All in favor of moving into executive session with a brief break prior to? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you for staying with us.